Snow began to fall again, soft as sifted flour, muting the clash of steel on bone and the ragged cries of the living as they fought to be anything but dead. Jon Snow tasted the flake on his tongue, a thing so delicate it almost mocked the brute urgency of the moment, before he drove Longclaw through the desiccated ribcage of the corpse that had once been a then raider. Violet-tinged eyes dimmed as the body collapsed. Jon wrenched the Valyrian blade free, breath fogging in the cold air, and spat into the slushy mud. Even an hour earlier, the spit might have hissed on the bonfire's coals. Now it merely pooled beside a blackened log, vanishing into watery ash. "Fall back!" he shouted, though he doubted his own voice carried beyond the roar of the shoreline. Hardhome's scraggy harbor writhed with bodies, wildlings, Night's Watch brothers, children clinging to mothers who in turn clung to blind panic, while the dead pressed in from every direction. Snow, soot, and shards of driftwood spun together as if the wind itself had no loyalty, ripping apart tents and tossing loose bits of clothing up like banners of surrender. Somewhere beyond the curtain of gray, Jon knew the Night King watched. He felt those unblinking eyes the way a man feels the threat of lightning on his skin. Prickling, unsympathetic, inevitable. Tormund Giantsbane barreled past, red beard clotted with crusted blood, driving his axe into the skull of a reanimated boy no more than 10. The crack rang like splitting ice. "Boat's near full," Tormund grunted, half to Jon, half to himself. "More, I'll swamp her, but they won't stop shoving." "Hold the line one more minute," Jon said, though his heart scolded him for promises he couldn't guarantee. "Just one." A howl rose to their left, feral and triumphant. Jon pivoted, finding the source. A white walker astride a pale, skeletal mare, spear of ice leveled. Everything about the creature glimmered. Moonlight, frost, something deeper that felt like the echo of 1,000 winters. And yet, the eyes were dark pits, starless. As the horse stepped forward, hooves cracked, abandoned rib bones underfoot, and each soft crunch was somehow louder than any warhorn Jon had heard. He would charge it if he could trust the earth beneath him. But the ground between lay layered with twitching limbs and shattered weapons, slick enough to send any man sprawling. So he waited, blade steady, feet braced. The walker's spear tip drew a half circle, tracing possibilities in the frigid air. Jon felt a surge, the past rushing up inside him. Arya's smile, Ghost's low whine in the kennels, the chill of Winterfell's Godswood pond at dawn. Then the walker lunged. Longclaw met ice, sparks of frozen vapor leaping as Valyrian steel bit deep into the crystalline spear shaft. The walker's expression never changed, but its grip tightened. Jon shifted, twisting, forcing the spear aside. For a breath he thought he'd gain purchase. Then something slammed his ribs from behind. He stumbled, half a step, maybe two, and in that slim space the walker reversed its thrust. The spear punched through his left shoulder, lodging beneath the collarbone. Jon's cry was strangled more by surprise than pain. He brought Longclaw down, severing half the spear's length, and staggered back with the shard still buried in him. Blood-soaked wool and mail. Jon sucked in air that tasted of rust and distant wildfire smoke. Each breath grew shorter, as if the world itself were shrinking against his lungs. He saw Ed Tollett ahead, face ash-gray with exhaustion, waving him toward a half-smashed cart that served as makeshift barricade. But the walker advanced again, fresh spear of ice forming in its palm, conjured from nothing but the night's breath. "For the watch," Jon murmured, more reflex than rallying cry. He raised Longclaw, and felt the spear tip slam into his sternum, a cold too complete to be called pain. It was the absence of everything. Lightfall, me. Heartfall. He did not remember dropping. Only lying. Snowflakes kissed his lashes. He blinked, expecting them to melt warm against his skin. They did not, nor did they sting. They simply stayed, tiny stars on a sky of black curls. The world receded, all sound tunneling down to Tormund's roar, to the shrill keen of a wildling girl clutching a carved wooden doll that would never protect her. Then even those dissolved. In the hush that followed, John felt himself standing, not upon Hardhome's muddy ground, but upon a glassy plain lit by green-blue aurorae that arced like serpents overhead. Beside him the Night King loomed, tall and still. No words passed. The silence itself was language enough. John searched for fear, and found the sensation locked behind frost-tinted glass. Unreachable. Oddly, he felt no hatred either, only a pull, as if the earth beneath this spectral plane were speaking his true name and pulling him home. When consciousness returned, if such a word applied to this new waking, the snow was gone. So was his heartbeat. John opened eyes that saw more shades of darkness than daylight, felt the world's heat patterns as vividly as he once felt summer wind. He sat, joints stiff but obedient. Around him, the slain stirred, pulled by a single will, not entirely the Night King's. Some breathless intuition told John that he too pulled. His fingers flexed. He rose. He was aware of the spear shaft protruding from his breastplate, but the ache no longer mattered. Life's pain had fled with life's warmth. He turned toward the harbor where survivors fought for gangplanks, pushing each other off decks now buckling under weight. They looked brittle, like figures carved in tallow. So quick to break. The thought glowed within him, foreign yet familiar. The Night King descended the slope with a grace that mocked gravity, feet barely indenting snow. He approached John directly. Something passed between them. Recognition, ordination, perhaps the final shattering of an oath sworn to a long-dead Lord Commander. John knelt. He thought how once he swore fealty to the wall, promising to hold back what stood before him. Now, he was the storm cloud, and the wall merely a ripple, awaiting the sky's roar. When he rose, he was alone. The Night King had vanished into ranks of ghouls shambling toward the water's edge. But within John's sight, within his mind, new contours formed. Paths of conquest, rivers that froze at a gesture, cities dimming candle by candle. He sensed, too, something he might yet call sorrow, thin as a single cracked thread in Castle Black's library tapestry, dangling inside the emptiness. He reached for it, but his hand closed on air that refused to warm. A howl broke the quiet. Ghost. The direwolf lunged through fallen beams, white coat blood-caked, eyes wild with recognition and terror. John's heart did not leap. It merely noted. The wolf skidded to a halt, tail low, hackles ridge. Its nostrils flared at the scent of its master. Yet the smell was wrong. Undeath had its own perfume of iron and snowmelt, and Ghost knew it. "Leave," John whispered. The word scratched, as though ice cracked inside his throat. Perhaps he hadn't spoken at all. Perhaps the notion drifted unsounded. Ghost backed a pace, whined, then turned, vanishing into smoke and sleet. John watched until the wolf was gone, and something inside him, something still shaped like a man, folded in upon itself. The spark dimmed. His gaze returned to the shoreline. The surviving boat lurched free, oars dipping, the vessel listing hard starboard from overcrowding. Wails carried over the water. John lifted a hand, not in farewell, but in command. The dead answered. Bodies slogged forward, some silent, others hissing air through broken teeth. Icy water swallowed their knees, hips, shoulders. As they vanished beneath the surface, the sea boiled with cold. Long moments later, the hull cracked from below. Screens burst, flaring and extinguished like torches snuffed. John did not smile. Satisfaction required heat. He turned inland, toward the mountain road. The army gathered like a storm tide, ready to crest. Among them, a horse stood riderless. The mount of the walker who had slain him. Its black eye sockets gleamed with starlight. John went to it. The beast lowered its head, accepting him. He swung astride, feeling no saddle bite, no muscle strain. He drew Longclaw. The blade, once gleaming steel, glimmered dull beneath hoarfrost now coating its length. Still, it felt true in his grip. "March," John said. A single word to no one and to all. Dead men and women formed columns. Arms rose. Spears of bone, pickaxes, rusted swords, no banners save the wind's own. He nudged the horse forward. The ranks followed. And so they left Hardhome hushed behind them, city of bones and broken hope, where no fires burned and no tongues sang. Ahead lay the long white road, and beyond that, the realm of warmth John once vowed to protect. He felt the promise stir again, fragile as a maidenhair fern beneath snow. But the cold smothered seedlings before they could root. Only purpose remained, vast and wordless, humming through marrow that was no longer his. Night deepened. Aurora flickered. Somewhere, a horn might have blown atop the wall, too distant to reach ears deaf to mortal sound. All the same, John turned his ice-black gaze southward, and the wall stones trembled in their ancient beds, sensing a deserter stranger than any oathbreaker, one who had not abandoned his post, but had brought the enemy within himself. He rode beneath pines whose boughs bent low, showering the column with silent frost. Each flake clung to John's cloak, crafting a mantle of moonlit ash. His breath no longer steamed. He thought of the old gods' faces carved in Winterfell's heart tree, how crimson tears once trailed down bleached wood. He wondered if they watched him now and wept again. He could not feel their grief. Perhaps the gods froze too. Hours passed in uncounted beats of undead hearts. Somewhere beyond the line of march, a raven flapped overhead, then another, then a nurter as black as charcoal smoke. They circled, crying warnings that only the wind cared to answer, before darting forth toward the watch's keeps. John did not raise his sword to fend them off. Ravens were messengers, and their message was writ now in footsteps, 30,000 strong, carving the snow into a path of brittle glass. Dawn would come, but not warmth. The sun, over the haunted forest, would cast its pallid halo upon the world, and men along the wall would lean forward to savor its reassurance. They would not know it heralded only the day's last age of living. As the first pale stripe of horizon light whispered up, John caught himself gazing east, where the narrow sea slept under winter's cloudy breath. For a heartbeat, he envisioned another life, a ship beating southward, red sails snapping above sea spray, as he, still breathing, pursued the promise of peace between wildling and watch. That life sailed away on a tide he could neither recall nor regret. He clenched his gauntlets on the reins. The sound echoed like grinding teeth. Yet, amid the quiet discipline of death that marched behind him, a slender voice stirred. One not of command, nor of the Night King, but of memory unextinguished. You were love. How did love feel? Warm as Sam's shy grin, as he grit his fingers trailing across his chest beside an underground pool, as a torch in the darkness of the fist of the first men. He reached inward for that heat and felt, absurdly, the faintest quiver of something akin to pain. It was not life rekindled, but life remembered, pale as moonlight yet real. In the abyss of sensation, it glimmered disquieting and small. John did not stop riding. Still, he let the echo linger. One part of him, perhaps the last part still truer than false, feared this ember as a man fears a secret tearing inside him. For even the slightest thaw might crack the crust of ice that held his broken self together, and what lay beneath might not obey the Night King's will, nor his own. Southward marched the dead, and all the while, high above, the auroras wrote their letters across the sky in unfolding cold flame. Somewhere in those shifting lights, John thought, the god of death spelled words only the dead could read. Words of invitation, words of caution, words that might, in some distant season, become a map of return. But if return required the risk of warmth, of hope reborn, of feeling again the sharp ache of a red woman's flames, or the loyal sorrow of ghosts' amber eyes, was that a journey he could take? Or would the frost obey its own decree and snuff the ember before it dared ignite? Jon Snow rode on, the question echoing without answer beneath the sky, where each color bled into the next, like wounds refusing to clot. Far behind him, the ruins of Hardhome smoldered faintly, a dim glow swallowed by the morning gloom. Far ahead, Castle Black's torches would soon speckle the wall like dying stars. The living would gather, Sir Alistair hurling curses, Dolorous Ed muttering hopeless quips, Sam clutching books that would do him no good. And among them, Somewhere on the parapets, Davos Seaworth might peer into the dawn and sense a frost unlike any other creeping across the stones. He might whisper a prayer to gods old and new. But prayers are words, and words alone cannot bar the gates of winter when winter rides the husk of the gatekeeper himself. Still, the ember pulsed. John held it at a distance, ashamed and yet unwilling to extinguish it. Perhaps one day it could be bartered, a coin of memory exchanged for a mercy neither ice nor fire yet imagined. Until that day, if days could still be counted, he would be what death required: a sword of silence, a commander of cold. The horse beneath him exhaled a plume that never clouded. John urged it into a trot, then a canter, leading the vanguard through stands of white birch. Branches snapped, quietly respectful of their passage. Below the snow, roots slumbered, waiting for spring that might never come. John wondered, would the world notice their absence? Would the weirwood's faces fade to blank bark as men's stories died on winter's breath? No answer rose. Only the crunch of hooves and the creak of advancing armor. Old leathers, frozen sinew. The army pressed on, measured and inexhaustible, closing the miles between one broken sanctuary and the next contested refuge. Jon Snow had once believed the wall eternal. He now saw it as a door, and doors open. In that certainty lay the quiet joy of a purpose fulfilled. Yet the ember flared once more, as though protesting, and he felt, truly felt, a flicker of fear, not for himself, but for those awaiting him on the far side of ice. Not that he might fail them, but that he might succeed. He tightened his grip on Longclaw. The frost coating its edge traced ghostly runes neither maester had ever catalogued. The blade, once a companion of living valor, now seemed an extension of winter's silent decree. He raised it to the dawn, saluting an old friend, or perhaps condemning one. Wind rose, carrying the tang of pine resin and distant sea salt. With it came the scent of living flesh. Dim, far, but unmistakable. John sniffed, and memory stirred of roast mutton, of bread baked in Maester Ammon's ovens. The hunger he felt was not of belly but of purpose. The living called to him the way flames call to moths. Inevitable, destructive, necessary. Down the slope ahead, a lone figure broke from the tree line, sprinting, breath pluming. A wildling boy, ragged, wide-eyed, perhaps escaped the slaughter in the harbor. He stumbled, glancing over his shoulder at the silent ranks descending behind. John watched, curious. The boy's cheeks were smeared with ash and tears that had frozen midway down. He carried no weapon, only fear. John's vanguard did not hasten. They moved as snow moves across a field. Slow, implacable. The boy screamed once, a sound thin as wind through chimes, before tripping over a root and pitching face first into the drift. His sobs shattered the stillness. John dismounted. Boots crunched, each step pressed a perfect imprint, edges already frosting over. He approached the child, every instinct, long drilled in the night's watch, forged by Lord Eddard's stern mercy, clamoring in patterns now half forgotten. He felt those instincts as echoes beneath the ice. The boy rolled onto his back, eyes squeezing shut, perhaps praying for mercy from the old gods. John knelt. Snowflakes settled on the boy's lashes. How very alive those flakes looked upon living skin, melting, streaking warmth across cold. John reached out, brushing a curl from the boy's brow. The child flinched, but did not scurry. Too tired for flight. Life, John thought, flickers. So easy to snuff. Yet the ember within him burned brighter now, as if drawn to the plea in this mortal's gaze. He glanced back at the advancing Wights. They would not pause. He looked forward, southward, where the wall shimmered in the distance like a blade laid flat. Choice trembled like a candle in open air. Was it his to make? Or was he merely a vessel, an arrow already loosed? The Night King's influence wrapped him like chains of glass, glinting, lovely, stern. Yet chains can crack if flawed. John turned his palm upward, testing. The boy's hand, trembling, slid into his. Human warmth seeped across the boundary of undeath. It did not burn. It whispered, The ember flared into a spark that stung his dead nerves. A miracle of almost a pain. The child's pulse thrummed through John's cold flesh, awakening an ache he'd thought buried beneath permafrost. Behind him, the army halted, as if sensing uncertainty. Eyes empty of soul fixed on their commander, waiting for a heartbeat longer than any he had lived. Jon Snow knelt in the snow, caught between two impossibilities: to remember mercy or to forget it forever. He rose slowly, bringing the boy to his feet. The child's legs wobbled. Jon placed a hand on his shoulder, steady as granite. His gaze swept the lines of the dead, then drifted south to the wall's distant shadow. Within that colossal barrier of ice, paths diverged. One for war unending, one for something else, something that dared not name itself hope. The army awaited his signal. Longclaw's point dipped toward the boy, then toward the forest's edge, where thickets offered temporary shelter. Jon's lips parted. "Run," he said, voice low as buried thunder. The boy stared, uncomprehending. Jon pointed again. "Run." The word hung in air like a promise, or a warning. The child bolted, stumbling once before catching stride. He vanished among pines. Jon watched until the forest swallowed him. The spark inside flared, threatening to rend the shell of ice that kept his being intact. Pain coughed through him, raw and unwelcome. He closed his eyes, steadying. Then he turned back to the army. The Night Kings were pressed like a storm front, icy and absolute. Jon lifted Longclaw and issued the order that rolled through the ranks in a hush. "Advance." The dead resumed their march. Snow thickened, veiling the path, blurring the memory of a single spared life. Somewhere in Jon's hollow chest, the spark dimmed to ember once more, its glow now tinged with smoke. The smoke of choice, of possibility, of betrayal, perhaps, or redemption yet to be measured. He carried it forward, a secret fire in the heart of ice, as the wall loomed nearer. Beyond that wall waited men who had called him brother, Lord Commander, friend Tati. They would soon confront something that bore his face, but wielded an authority beyond imagining. Whether that face still concealed a soul, or the shard of one, might shape the fate of realms. Sunrise spread pale gold fingers across the sky, but warmth felt less than rumor. Winter did not yield. Jon Snow, commander of the quiet, rode on. Wind whips across the haunted forest, scouring the bark of ancient pines until they rasp like bones rubbed together, a dry, ceaseless whisper that threads through the ranks of the silent host. Day drags its pale body westward, leaving behind a sky the color of tarnished steel. Jon Snow rides at the fore, the dying light glazing his features in murky pewter, accentuating the angular planes that once belonged to a man who knew chill only as inconvenience. Now cold is his marrow, his breath a phantom he never feels. And yet somewhere inside the meat of memory, a human pulse endures. An ember, guttering but alive, coaxed to glow by the warmth of a terrified child. He guides the undead line along a ridge that overlooks the milky ribbon of the milkwater. Frozen slabs clog its current, merging into a raft of jigsaw shards sliding south, and where water breaks against the shore, vapor sighs upward. A living river, exhaling its final warmth. Jon studies the flow with eyes that read heat as color. The faint amber of tepid eddies, the sickle, thin coil of crimson, where a doe has slipped beneath the ice and still bleeds. Such detail once served a hunter. Now it serves a commander of restless legionaries who cannot tire, cannot thirst, but still require paths that favor speed. Below the ridge, wolves keep wary distance, gray shadows loping beside the march, too canny to rush a column whose scent confuses hunger with dread. Jon tracks their silhouettes until dusk smudges them out. For a heartbeat he thinks of Ghost, racing ahead somewhere toward the wall, perhaps already baying beneath its looming immensity. The notion catches inside him like a fishhook tugging soft flesh. His grip tightens on Longclaw's reins, leather squeaking. If the direwolf lives, he will warn Castle Black, and those torches will brighten, and horns will blare, and men he once loved will draw swords they polished in the dark against nightmares. Men he might still love. The ache of that word sparks behind his ribs, but the ice there is thick, unyielding. Night sweeps fully down. Under elder boughs where snow muffles every tread, the host halts. John motions, a tilt of his chin. The dead fold into waiting stillness, posture slackened yet ready, like blades sheathed in frost. He slides from the saddle, boots crunching into snowpack. Each motion he commands is precise, absent weariness. But a ghost pain lingers in the joints, a memory of exhaustion, rather than exhaustion itself. He wonders if even illusions might shatter with time, leaving only perfect numbness. That thought troubles him more than the deeds he must soon compel. He moves among his army. Frost forms on his lashes. Whisper, fine. Where he passes, wights respond to his presence, not as men to a lord's inspection, but as filings drawn to a lodestone's pull. Their heads pivot. Eyes, some blue-lit, some burnt out, track him with blank anticipation. The Night King's brand nestles in every spine, but John feels their thread of obedience twine also through his own sternum. He has become a second conductor, an amplifier in the symphony of death. His will fused into theirs until it is impossible to discern where autonomy ends and command begins. He doubts the Night King relinquished mastery. Rather, he opened a corridor inside John through which the greater will may flow. Yet corridors can have doors, and doors, locks. He tests a theory. Raising one gloved hand, he envisions every soldier easing their weapons to rest, blades lowered, claws unclenched. The legion obeys in perfect unison, metal ringing softly as it settles. Joan's pulse, a fragment, no more than a tremor, quivers at the assertion of power. Quickly he dismisses the gesture, unwilling to draw the Night King's scrutiny across snowbound miles. But satisfaction lingers, forlorn and fragile. The comfort of knowing he remains, in some part, a commander by choice as well as by design. A shape approaches from the darkness. A white walker astride its skeletal steed, crystalline skin gleaming with starlight. It halts within arm's reach, breathing the stillness of unmelting ice, spear leveled downward in unspoken query. John meets the creature's gaze. The walker tilts its head, bird-like, as though listening for deeper resonance in Joan's silence. Then, apparently satisfied, it points its spear south, toward the glow that now flares against heaven's underbelly. Castle Black's watchfires light the horizon, flickering orange like a necklace of embers laid across the throat of night. John nods once. The walker wheels its mount and vanishes between ghostly fir trunks. Snow drifts settle into its wake, erasing tracks. Alone again among the dead, John ascends a low outcrop. From this vantage, the wall resembles a cliff carved by a mad sculptor to mimic the waves of a frozen sea. Spires and concavities, overhangs bigger than keeps. Lanterns on the ramparts flicker like fireflies. He imagines Ed Tollett muttering curses at the cold, Sir Eliezer rattling off orders that bite harsher than wind, and Sam, dear, plump Sam, hunched over ledgers in the warmth of the library, hoping knowledge might yet shield his friend. He wants to believe that friend remains, but what stands here wears skin gone bloodless around lips that speak commands to corpses. He presses fingers to his breastplate where the broken spear still juts, crystalline, a stake hammered through what was. The wound no longer bleeds, though if he plucked the shard free, perhaps black ichor would ooze, thick as pitch. He leaves it. A reminder. A tether. Footsteps crunch behind him. Another wight, this one broader than the rest, draped in the rotting remnants of a then chieftain's furs. The creature bows, spasmodically. John senses its thirst for instruction. He gestures to the ridge's edge and shapes a thought of reconnaissance. Take 50. Scout the forest fringe. Gather fallen timber. At dawn we move. The order ripples outward. 50 peel away, quiet as snowfall, axes and claws ready to harvest wood for makeshift ladders and mantlet shields. The wall's gate is a target, but so too is the southern face. Even dead men climb given purchase. Hours remain to craft that purchase. He turns toward the sickle moon, a shard of milky quartz low over the peaks. Beneath its wan glare, patterns of aurora sweep, green and indigo banners riven by invisible war. John watches their slow dance and tries to recall what beauty felt like, not simply registered. His memory offers fragments. Ygritte's laughter echoing off a hollow ice shelf, the crack and sizzle of warm grease when the cooks fried onions for stew. Arya's crooked grin as she beat Bran with a wooden sword. Each memory cuts, yet each also fans the ember, coaxing orange glow through seams in the encasing frost. Fearing those sparks, he descends the outcrop, slipping between still forms of watchful wights. He checks knots in the ranks, ensuring spacing, confirming that every path north to south is clear for quick redeployment. The habits of command anchor him in routine. When he finishes, he stands at the camp's heart. If a camp can be said to have a heart whose soldiers need no rest, no food, no warmth. The only heartbeat is his phantom, and it shivers now, irregular, as though something unseen drums at the shell of ice around it. He senses movement again at the tree line. A creature emerges, an elk, antlers heavy with ice rime, flanks gaunt from winter's dearth. It hesitates, snuffling the still air. John's host remains statue, still save for empty eyes tracking potential prey. He raises a hand. Not yet. The elk edges forward, ears swiveling. It must sense something wrong, but cannot parse it. John watches, transfixed by the living sheen on its pelt where moonlight glides. For a second, he imagines releasing all of them, himself included, back to the wild plane of mortal breathing. The elk steps closer. One more pace and spears will impale its ribs. John drops his hand. Freedom thrums through the dead like a plucked string. Spears spring. The elk screams once. Then silence. John walks away, clenching jaw until molars crack like distant ice. He needs the hush inside lest memory drown him. He chooses a hollow between two spruce trees and stands motionless, face turned south, tracking the slow tick of stars. He will not close eyes. Dreams now belong to others. Instead, he consults the map, imprinting itself against his mind. Half a dozen abandoned ranger trails leading from the forest floor to hidden switchbacks carved into the wall's northern cliffside. He catalogs the number of wights with climbing claws, the weight a giant's rotting sinew can still hoist, the reach of each walker's ice javelin. Every variable locks into place like iron plates on a warhorse. By dawn he knows how the assault will begin. Above the wall, hours later, Barrow Osgood squints down from the east watchtower. Leaning so far over the parapet his fellow sentry yanks his cloak to keep him from toppling. "I see torches," Barrow mutters. His breath puffs white. Too low to be rangers, too steady to be will-o'-the-wisps, he thinks. He calls to the sergeant of the guard, who calls to Sir Alistair Thorne, who storms up the ladder half-armored and wholly furious that his respite has been broken yet again by fool tales of bogeymen. But one look through the iron-bound spyglass steals the color from Thorne's cheeks. He orders horns sounded. The blast rolls along the curtain wall, echoing across ice valleys. 3 notes, massive, mournful. Wights and walkers prepare for battle. John hears it while still leagues away, a low bellow blossoming across the forest canopy. The call stirs something inside him, a memory pivoting on instinct. When 3 horns sounded at the fist of the first men, and panic turned seasoned rangers into stumbling children. He recalls hacking through snow to reach frightened horses, screaming commands above the clamor, holding order by force of voice. That voice seems alien now, yet hearing the horns rekindles its echo. His lips shape words, "Hold steady." The dead hold. They do not fear horns. They have none to break. He signals. Scouts race back, bringing logs stripped and lashed into crude ladders. Pellucid ice axes glint in walker hands, crafted by conjuration rather than forge. He designates giants, 4 immense shadows cobbled together from 3 corpses apiece, sinews tied with ice that will not yield, to shoulder the largest mantlets forward. They obey, trudging with thunderous rhythm that vibrates through John's bones. Each step shakes snow from boughs in glittering falls. How close is Ghost now? He imagines white fur racing the parapets, hackles bristled, mouth flecked with foam as he throws his cry to moonlit sky. Does Sam stand shoulder to shoulder with builders, trembling behind pickaxes? John snarls at the thought. A sound half wolf, half avalanche. He channels it into motion. The Legion advances. The forest thins near the clearing that edges the northern curtain side of Castle Black. There, felled oaks have been stacked into bristling chevaux de frise by rangers preparing since Hardhome's grim raven arrived. Torches stud the ramparts every 5 yards, sizzling under windlash. Snow minces across the open field, fluttering like confetti torn from the sky. John halts the host just inside the tree line. Though breathless, he can still taste air, acrid with pitch, sweet with pine resin, undercut by the coppery tang of sweating men. His tongue curls at that scent with something he refuses to name. He lifts Longclaw overhead. Frost runes shimmer. In the silent span before attack, he feels again the ember. Small, insistent, glowing behind his breastbone. Memory tugs, whispering question after question. Could he turn them aside? Could he defy the Night King at the very gates he once swore to guard? The tremor of doubt flows outward, sifting through the tether between him and his army. But it meets a colder tide. The inexorable will of the Night King pushing back, smoothing waves to polished glass. The Legion waits. John exhales. Force of will only, for no lungs work here. And drops Longclaw. Giant surge, mantlets raised. Walkers lope forward, skating over snow, their very tread frosting the ground behind them. The horde spills from the trees with the suddenness of floodwater. Arrows hiss from the ramparts, streaking fire, slamming into shields of sinew and bone. Some wights crumple, pin-cushioned, but rise again unless arrowheads are obsidian. Rangers gasp as corpses stand with shafts still jutting like quills. John strides behind the first wave, his cloak snapping. He feels each casualty, a tug like hair yanked from scalp, yet no pain. He scans the parapet for familiar faces and spots Dolorous Ed wrestling a barrel of wildfire against the Merlin lip. Ed looks older, cheeks hollowed from sleepless nights, but his sarcasm seems suspended in this frantic moment, replaced by grim concentration. Beside him, a woman in red whispers over candles. Melisandre? No, her flame hair is darker, shoulders stooped. Perhaps another red priestess called by rumor of Death's army. John doubts invocations will matter. A trebuchet built atop the king's tower launches a barrel that arcs overhead, trailing wildfire's sickly green glow. It shatters in mid-air, rain of emerald flame sizzling across the front ranks. Wights ignite, staggering, yet still marching until charred limbs separate. The light stings Joan's eyes. He raises an arm to shield sight. He knows the outer layers will burn away, but more dead stream through the gap, climbing over smoldering comrades. Giants crash against chevaux de frise, using tree trunks for mallets to hammer aside barricades. Splinters fan into the wind. Behind them, the ladder teams sprint, sinking uprights into churned earth, scrambling upward despite arrows. Rangers shove poles to pry ladders clear, dumping wights in tumbling cascades. But falls do not break what is already broken. The dead rise and climb again. John considers his next gambit. The gate. Castle Black's main gate is fortress thick, bars of weirwood reinforced by iron. But the hinge braces have rotted under years of neglect. If he focuses the giants there while the walkers freeze the hinge grease, perhaps. He raises Longclaw, preparing to redirect forces. John! The name knifes through chaos. Raw, incredulous, ringing from a throat he knows as well as his own. Samwell Tarly stands atop the steps to the Lord Commander's tower, cheeks blotched with cold and terror, holding aloft a lantern whose wavy glass distorts the flame. He wears Maester's blacks now, link of silver pewter chain gleaming at neck. In one hand he clutches a dragonglass dagger, its edges obsidian sheen. The dagger trembles. Sam's grip is more plea than threat. John freezes beneath the rampart's looming shadow. The Night King's will roars inside his skull, urging forward momentum, But Sam's voice feels like a spear piercing the shell of ice and striking the ember. For a heartbeat, Joan's knees threaten to buckle, not from wound but from memory's weight. Days spent in Castle Black's library, arguing over maps, sharing stolen cups of mulled wine. He meets Sam's wide eyes. They brim with horror, not merely at the army, but at the singular recognition. Friend turned foe, brother turned legend of terror. Sam raises the dagger. His lips shape words, maybe an entreaty, maybe a prayer. Joan's host swarms around him, climbing, dying, burning, surging. But all sound blurs until only Sam's ragged breaths penetrate. John takes one step forward. Bile of dread, new, bright, bubbles in his throat. If he reaches Sam, will he kill him? Can he stop? On the parapet above, Sarah Laser seizes a bundle of pitch-soaked ropes. He sets them ablaze and hurls them toward John's position. Flaming cords unravel, hissing. John sees them descend in slow motion. With reflex born from training, he dives aside. Rolling across snow, the cords slap earth, spattering fire. Tense heat licks at his cloak. He rises, smoke wreathing him like tattered wings. The distraction suffices. Giants batter the gate now. Fists and makeshift rams pounding. Walkers sweep spears across ramparts, freezing oak into brittle splinters that shatter under subsequent blows. Panicked builders scramble to reinforce braces, yelling over thunderous impacts. John pushes forward again, through smoke, through shrieks, toward Sam. But the Night King's command rises, a tidal current. John feels his legs altering course, angling toward the gate as strategic imperative overrides personal fixation. His will fractures, shards grinding. He fights to reassert direction. His boot heels skid, leaving ragged ruts. In his chest, the ember burns white-hot, scorching through layers of frost until cracks fissure outward. Pain, true pain. Flashes, searing raw nerve that should not exist. He chokes, drops to one knee. A walker turns, sensing weakness. It strides to him, eyes twin chips of glacier quartz, spear poised. John wrenches upright before the spear strikes. He parries with long claw, steel shrieking on ice. Sparks of frozen vapor burst. He ripostes, severing spear shaft. The walker recoils, expression unreadable. Behind John, Wights hesitate, coherence lost for an instant in the vortex of conflicting commands. John realizes the paradox. While he struggles, the army falters. The Night King's influence surges to compensate, but the relay is imperfect. Some Wights wander, hacking allies. Giants slow their ramming pace. Rangers on the wall seize advantage, raining black-fletched arrows and braziers of molten lead. Toppling ladders faster than they rise. A cheer rises, ragged but hopeful. Sam sees the shift. He starts down the steps, clutching dagger. Melting snow squeals beneath his boots. He calls Joan's name again, louder, voice cracking. John staggers backward, locking eyes with Sam. Words push against the vice of his throat. Sam, go. But voice fails. His mouth shapes nothing. His hand, bloodless and gloved, rises in half gesture. Warning or greeting, no one can discern. And in that instant, the Night King wrenches the leash taut. Joan's vision snaps wide. Cold surges like tidal bore, extinguishing the ember under avalanche roar. His spine arches, arms fling wide as though struck by unseen bolt. Frost ripples outward from him across snow, encasing footprints. The legion stiffens, alignment restored. Giants bellow, sound like tree trunks splitting. They smash gate braces anew, each blow quaking the foundation stones. Sam falters midway down the stair, dread freezing his limbs. He watches John transform. Frost-climbing cloak fibers, rimming beard, eyes glazing the near black of dead ice. Hope curdles inside Sam's chest. He lifts the dragonglass dagger with shaking arm but cannot force feet forward. The gate bursts inward with a reverberation that shakes Castle Black to its core. Wood and iron explode in shards, stabbing through Wight's packed nearest. The breach yawns wide, and undead flood courtyard stones dark with slush and ash. Crossbowmen on balconies release desperate volleys until ammunition runs dry. John strides through the shattered threshold, long claw leveled. Sam retreats up steps, nearly tripping on robe hem. Others push past him. Builder recruits carrying torches, cooks armed with carving knives, maids clutching iron pokers. John cuts one down. Swift, clean stroke cleaving collarbone. And the man's scream gurgles into nothing. John feels blade meet warm resistance. He notes trajectory, angle, depth, like scribbles in a ledger. And yet each kill paper cuts that ember, flaking ash layers, threatening to reignite. Across the yard, Dolorous Ed leaps from battlement onto a grain cart, wielding a two-handed axe. He hacks a white skull, then another, shouting profanities about the pointlessness of shoveling latrines if everyone is going to die anyway. John hears him, remembers nights on watch sharing complaint. Pain spikes brighter, but the leash yanks again, drowning it. Walkers fan out, freezing pathways. Sealing side doors shut with sheets of crystalline rime, so living defenders cannot retreat deeper. Panic escalates. Men slip. Limbs shatter brittle on ice. John pushes forward, target fixed. The inner gatehouse, beyond which lies the stairwell that snakes upward the wall's height. If he can take that, if Wights can climb within, rampart defense will crumble, and the flood south will begin. Halfway across the yard, a shadow blacker than night rockets from the chapel eaves. Ghost. The direwolf launches at John, jaws wide, teeth-seeking throat still warm in memory of hunts shared. John twists, instinctive. Longclaw rises to parry, but hesitation stalls momentum. Ghost collides, inertia driving both into snowdrift. The direwolf's weight pins John. Hot breath steams, amber eyes blaze pleading fury. John meets that gaze, and something inside cracks, audible to his ears alone. He drops Longclaw. Blade, half, buries in drift. Ghost snarls, fangs grazing Joan's cheek, yet does not bite. He whines, a note of confusion and mourning. John's hands rise, neither striking nor soothing. Under Wolf's paws, his chest heaves with breaths he does not need. The ember inside fans to flame beneath fur and muscle of his loyal companion, radiating warmth so intense frost steams from his armor. The Night King senses loss of control. An inhuman scream splits the sky, distant, yet felt in every bone. Wight's nearest John stiffen, turning. Walkers converge, spear points aimed at Ghost Wight pelt. John feels compulsion flood back, urging him to throw off the wolf, resume advance, slay what binds him to human past. But flame grows, for first time since death. Sweat beads along his brow, sizzling as it touches ice. John's voice rasps free. Ghost, run! The command rips throat, raw. At the sound his master's voice returned, Ghost jerks back, tail low, confusion giving way to obedience. He bounds sideways, dodging a walker's jab, circles towards Sam perched on tower stair. Sam reaches, grabbing fur, steadying himself as Ghost guides him upward. Together they disappear behind a curtain of falling snow. John staggers to feet, dragon-glass shard jutting like a thorn of night from his shoulder. He retrieves Longclaw. Da-da. The flame inside wavers, but persists. He feels two wills now, equal tension. The Night King's icy iron, and his own acute anguish riding heat. The collision is agony. He thinks his skull may split. Yet from that agony rises clarity. Choice, terrible, and pure. He recalls Maester Aemon's words. Kill the boy, and let the man be born. Perhaps death killed the boy. Perhaps what stands is neither boy nor man, but some third thing. Still, choice remains. He plants Longclaw's tip in ground, dropping to knees. Around him, Wights hesitate, uncertain in feedback current of contradictory orders. Above, walkers hiss, frost spiraling off their weapons. One steps forward to deliver killing stroke. John tears the spear shard from his sternum with one violent wrench. black slushy blood fountains tinged with frost. He slams the shard point down before him. The ice spear meets earth with resonant clang. Shockwave bursts, ring of frost blasting outward like pulse of lightning captured in crystal. Wight's near circle freeze, solid, limbs locked. Walkers recoil, armor cracking. Jon pushes, mentally, spiritually, against the tether, driving spear of his will back along veins of control toward its distant master. In frozen wilds leagues away, atop a hill of shattered mammoths. The Night King arches in sudden fury. Jon feels the counterpull, a hurricane dragging sailcloth taut dotty. He screams, bloodless voice echoing across courtyard walls. Sarah Leeser witnesses the convulsion from Rampart Dotto. He sees Jon, enemy, traitor, face tilted to storm, mouth open in silent roar. And he sees walkers falter, Wight stiffen. Recognizing opportunity, Sarah Leeser rallies archers, obsidian. Aim for the blue-eyed devils. Loose. Shafts tipped with dragon glass streak, lodging in walker chests. One shatters like iced glass. Another howls before crumbling. For each walker that falls, dozens of Wights collapse, puppets clipped from strings. The courtyard clears in sudden explosive respite. Builders charge forward with hammers to smash motionless corpses. Flames rise where torches touch brittle flesh. Jon kneels at Eye of Storm. He knows this reprieve is brief. Night King will reassert. He weighs what remains of the flame against cost of further defiance. He sees Sam leaning over parapet, Ghost at his side, tears glazing cheeks. He sees Ed limping, axe bloodied, shouting him onward. Whether to redemption or death, unclear. He sees the wall behind, centuries of vows frozen into stone. To let the Night King through would doom countless innocents. To stop the Night King he must sever the leash entirely, and that may sever his own existence as well. He grips Longclaw. Stands. The ice-wound gapes, yet dark liquid lessens. Perhaps heart no longer feeds it. He strides to gatehouse stair. Living defenders shrink back unsure. Jon ignores them, ascending 3 steps at a time until he meets Sam at top platform. Sam's dagger trembles. Ghost growls low, protective. Jon halts 2 paces away. "Sam," he whispers. Word drips sorrow, gratitude, plea all at once. Sam's breath hitches, but he holds stance. "Are you? Sam asks, voice small yet determined. "Half." Jon swallows, throat scorched. "Other half, his." He jerks chin north. Wind whips cloak, revealing ice-veined scars across neck. "Can you fight it?" "Trying." Jon chokes laugh devoid of humor. "Need your help." Sam lowers blade an inch. "What can I do?" "Fire. Dragonglass. Anything." Jon's gaze burns. "Must break his hold. Maybe kill me." "No." Sam's refusal flares immediate. Tears spill. "There's always another way." Jon steps closer. Ghost stands between, shoulder pressed to Sam's knee, but does not snarl. Jon kneels, level gaze with friend. "Listen. If I lose, end me. Promise." Sam's lip trembles. "I promise." Jon exhales relief and anguish. He rises, turns to courtyard where battle resumes at periphery. Night King's second wave cresting forest edge. Without walkers the tide lessens, but numbers still threaten. Jon sees giants stirring, ladder teams regrouping. He addresses AD below. Oil the stairs, collapse them if needed. Ed blinks in shock at hearing Commander's voice of old. But he nods, shouts orders. Jon tasks Sam. Gather every dragonglass blade, every torch, form kill pockets behind him. Sam hesitates, then races off, Ghost loping beside. Jon walks along platform toward the pulley winch controlling gatehouse portcullis de Obstad. He sets Longclaw against gear teeth, jamming mechanism. Then he descends interior stair into the dark throat of the wall, leaving behind the chaos outside. Inside, ice corridors swallow sound. Torch brackets sputter every 100 paces, shedding pools of gold that look sickly against blue walls. John's breath no longer plumes, but his heart, dead though it may be, hammers insistently. He searches memory of old ranger maps. There is a chamber midway, once used to store grain, now abandoned. Thick ice there forms natural columns, load points of the wall. Shatter a pillar, and tons of ice will slump, sealing the inner passage. It might also bury him. Acceptable. But will it hinder the Night King's remote leash? Unknown. He reaches the chamber. Torchlight dims. He hacks at ice with Longclaw, blows sending fissures spidering. Shards fly, clinking. Pain from his wound flares. Fatigue, absurdly, creeps into undead muscles as if humanity incrementally restores. He welcomes the ache. Fissure widens. A low groan vibrates. Above, somewhere in the dizzying height, ice shears crack. Snow dust sifts downward, swirling in column. John redoubles blows. Each strike is prayer, confession, penance. He pictures faces. Arya's determined stare, Sansa's quiet resilience, Bran's distant knowing, Rickon's laughter swallowed by grave. He hears Ned's voice. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. John swings. Thunder detonates overhead. A slab slides, slow, then all at once, impact quaking floor. John stumbles back. The column buckles. Ice collapses like dominoes, roaring cannonade echoing interior hollow. He runs, boots skidding. Passage behind him implodes, filling with grinding white avalanche. A blast of air flings him forward, slamming against up-ramp wall. Darkness claims sight. When awareness flickers, he is half buried, torso pinned by slab, legs numb. He claws free, dragging brittle body across debris. Back the way he came is sealed beneath tons of ice. Forward toward courtyard remains narrow crawlspace. He wriggles, scraping armor, emerging at trestle leading to shaft that opens near Maester's rookery. He hauls upright. Flame still flickers inside chest. Faint, but alive. He senses Night King's leash attenuated, signal distorted by ice mass. Control loosens. He feels lighter, afraid and exhilarated. Outside, horns blow again. One short, two long. Night gathers for sortie. Good. He staggers into rookery. Ravens screech, flapping. A shovel leans against feed barrel. He wedges door shut behind, braces with shovel. In dim glow of brazier, he finds quills and parchment. He writes, "The wall breached if I fall. Burn the dead. Kill the Night King." He signs with abbreviated scrawl, JS not sure why. Perhaps letters will mean something. Footfalls outside. Sam's voice. "John, are you in there?" "John Unbars," admits Sam and Ghost, plus Ed lugging satchel. Sam thrusts bundle. Dragonglass axes, arrowheads, obsidian-tip spear. Ed drops flask of lamp oil. "Figured you'd need these, Lord Commander. Assuming you're still him. If not, I'll kindly request you hand them back so we can stab you." "Now." John exhales a dry laugh. "Still me. For now." They huddle, murmuring strategy. John explains collapse. Path north now sealed, but fight remains in yard. Night King will eventually arrive to personally shatter obstruction. Must strengthen defenses south side. Evacuate wounded, through tunnel to Mole's town. Ed scratches stubble. "You're barking orders like old days. I'm inclined to follow, but the lads'll piss themselves seeing you lead again. Some are ready to shoot you on sight." "Let them." John lifts dragonglass spear. "If I turn, kill me." Ed nods grim. They descend. Courtyard is chaotic mosaic of half-burned corpses, broken ladders, flame patches. Walkers absent. Whites attack piecemeal under weakened influence. Brothers regroup around John almost instinctively. Some flinch, others cheer. He waves them silent, directing teams to douse breach with oil. Set barriers alight. Snow now falls heavy, damping flame. They improvise torches dipped in resin. For hours they labor. repulsing sporadic charges. John fights alongside them, Longclaw crunching through skulls, Dragonglass spear pinning torsos. With each kill, men look at him less like specter, more like comrade. Yet inside he perceives tug of leash strengthening. The Night King draws nearer. He imagines that chill shape riding undead horse across fields, eyes ancient and pitiless. At dawn, pink rim glows east. John stands atop gatehouse ruins, gazing across expanse. In distance, black speck grows, flanked by ranks of wights like rippling tide. The Night King himself, approaching to claim what slipped. Uns gut knots. He turns to Sam. It ends today. Sam's face bleaches. How can we fight him? Your books. John gestures. You told me obsidian, Valyrian steel. And fire. Dragons. Voice falters, recalling Daenerys, dragons lost. But one remains south perhaps. Too far. They must improvise. Ed peers over parapet. We have obsidian. We have misery. No dragons. John studies field. Snowdrifts mounded where giants fell, their bones protruding like white towers. Inspiration flashes. The wildfire barrels ignited earlier still smolder under debris. Blue flame steam rises from cracked cask. If they can lure Night King near and trigger blast enhanced with dragonglass shrapnel. Maybe. They hurry, assembling cunning snare. Bury cask in shallow pit at breach threshold, cover with charred planks. Dragonglass shards embedded against barrels seams. Fuse fashioned from soaked rope winds across yard to parapet where Sam will wait with lantern. Troops muster along walls. Ghost trots to John's side. The direwolf's presence fortifies flickering flame inside him. He strokes blood, matted fur. Stay, he whispers. Ghost huffs, but obeys. The Night King's vanguard arrives, disciplined, unhurried. Walkers stride front rank, spears glittering. At their center rides the Night King on skeletal stallion, frost aura swirling like cloak of torn clouds. His gaze locks on John, a magnetic bolt across battlefield. John grips Longclaw, senses leash snap taut, an electric crack through veins. But the flame is shield now, pain jabs, but does not dominate. He steps forward onto rubble ramp, leading down. Night King halts 20 yards short of breach. He dismounts in one liquid motion, feet kissing earth with silence of falling snow. Walkers fan behind, wights freeze, awaiting gesture. Night King surveys hole in gatehouse, smoldering walls, collapsed ladders. Head tilts, puzzle of amusement. He takes one measured step, then another. John retreats deliberately, descending slump of rubble, leading enemy toward trap. Heart pounds alive with borrowed spark. Behind parapet, Sam's knuckles whiten on lantern handle. He counts breaths, waiting for John to cross chalk mark scratched on stone. Night King follows. Distance narrows. John stops 5 yards inside yard. They stand face to face, one alive dead commander against primeval monarch of ice. Wind hushes, as if world holding breath. Night King raises arm, subtle flick. Wights surge around perimeter but pause short, leaving arena for duel. John lifts Longclaw, meeting blue stare. No words exist between them. Will and opposition suffice. He attacks first, sprinting. Valyrian edge meets crystalline sword drawn from nothing. Impact bursts shards, sparks of frost and steel. John pivots, slashes. Night King parries, ripostes. Speed uncanny, regal in precision. Blades ring mighty. John fights low, slides, aiming dragonglass dagger with offhand. Night King sidesteps, palm out, ice blossoming along blade, encasing dagger in brittle crystal that shatters. John whirls, spine screaming, and Longclaw's hilt cracks on Night King's shoulder. Frost spiderwebs up sword, threatening to snap metal. John flings blade aside before it splinters, rolls beneath sweeping counterstroke. Night King advances. John backpedals toward pit. Flame inside roars desperate. He snatches Warhammer from fallen builder, hurls. Night King flicks wrist. Hammer ices, drops. Jon crosses chalk. Sam yanks lantern hood. Flame leaps onto rope fuse soaked in oil and pitch. Fire snakes across yard, sparking bright line. Night King senses, turns. Too late. Flame strikes barrel. Green wildfire blossoms. Roaring column of emerald and gold. Explosion lifts ground. Hurls bodies. Shatters rampart. Dragon glass shards propelled in shockwave glitter like shooting stars. Night King at epicenter stiffens. Light refracting kaleidoscope through icy flesh. Shards pierce chest, arms, skull. Flames engulf, roaring higher than wall shadows. For heartbeat world dazzles. Then, crack like mountains rending. Night King fractures. Blue eyes flare white, shatter into dust. His torso splits, crystalline flesh sublimating in heat. He crumbles. Shards disintegrating in fountain of steam. Across field, every walker stiffens, screams soundless, breaks apart. Wights collapse wholesale. Strings severed. Silence descends but for crackle of wildfire. Jon staggers at blast edge, ears ring, cloak aflame. Ghost races, tackling him, smothering sparks. Jon coughs, rolling. The leash is gone. He feels its absence like limb severed. Relief tidal waves through nerves. And yet, he still lives. Or unlives. He touches chest. Ember still glows. But ice recedes, leaving skin flush with color returning. Blood pumps anew. Dark red where frost-white veins once lay. Sam rushes, arms out. Jon. He kneels, pressing cloth to new bleeding wounds. Jon winces, pain bright, glorious. He is human again, or enough. He meets Sam's gaze, tears mixing with ash on cheeks. "It's done," Sam whispers. But Jon's eyes shift to fallen shards of Night King's remains. Among fragments, faint shimmer persists, a sliver of ice still pulsing, rhythmic like beat of heart. Jon understands. Seed of winter cannot be so easily slain. Power will seek vessel. He stands, though knees quake. Wordless, he strides to shard. Sam calls after but does not follow. Jon kneels, picks fragment with gauntleted fingers. Frost creeps metal but not skin. Flame within his chest meets ice in shard. Two forces, equal, opposite, entwining. If left, someone might stumble upon power reborn. If kept, maybe contained, maybe balanced. He closes fist around shard. Frost bites palm, yet heat radiates, forging equilibrium, neither devouring other. Breath steams, a human breath. He feels weight of both lives. Light and night. He pockets shard in leather pouch around neck. Turns to Sam, Ed, Ghost, ragged defenders watching from parapet. They expect proclamation, triumph, or despair. He looks at them, at ruin of gatehouse, at sunrise climbing above peaks, in blush pink, and speaks quiet but steady. War's not over, but winter lost its king. Now men must choose what becomes of the cold. They stare, comprehending little, but some hope flickers. Jon inhales chill morning. Pain throbs in muscles, welcome, alive. He feels ember steadied, fused with ice shards' cool pulse, fire and frost sharing single heart. Perhaps he is forged anew, sword tempered by extremes, edge yet to reveal purpose. He turns south, toward rolling hills where kingdoms wake unaware of night's narrowly averted dominion. Behind, Castle Black's brothers raise tentative cheers. Ghost pads at his heels. Sam hurries to match stride. Jon says nothing. Journey ahead is long. To Winterfell, to Dragonstone, to every hearth needing guard against shadows still lurking. He will walk in day's light, but night will walk within him, whispering caution, reminding that balance-earned demands vigilance forever. Yet for this breath, under a sky rinsed pale gold, he is simply Jon, alive, heart beating, free. He touches pouch at throat. The shard chills fingertips. Flame warms knuckles. Together they thrum, discordant yet harmonious. Cadence of a song the world has not heard. A song still writing its chorus. He steps beyond broken gates, footprints deep in fresh drift, and snow falls anew, soft, clean, forgiving. Yeah. The wind came down from the far north with new hunger, no longer shaped by the Night King's will but alive with a kind of chaos, a savage, directionless cold that bit and snapped, wild as a freed wolf. Jon Snow walked from the wreck of Castle Black's gatehouse with each step echoing his own resurrection. Pain in his legs, a catch in his ribs where frost had bound him too tightly for so long. The embers in his chest were real now. Heat, ragged breath, the dull thump of a pulse beating in his ears. His right hand clenched the leather pouch where the shard of the Night King's heart or power, or memory, whatever it was, burned with ice that would not melt. He felt it, both as chill and as a steadiness, an inward warning not to let the world's warmth lull him. At his side, Ghost prowled low, the great dire wolf's eyes darting between the battered survivors and the field of death left behind. Sam hurried to keep pace, cloak trailing in ash and snow, hands shaking from the night's terrors and from the weight of what they'd done. Behind them, the watch moved like men woken from nightmare, Ed barking orders, brothers hauling barricades into rough piles, others tending to the dying or lighting pyres for the newly dead. More than a few cast wary glances at Jon, uncertain whether the figure in black was truly their Lord Commander again, or some stranger who wore his face. They moved through the ruins of the yard. Here and there wights twitched in the melting snow, eyes lifeless, unmoving. Puppets forever cut from their strings. Walkers' remains glittered with 1,000 tiny cracks, blue crystals slowly leaching color until they faded into puddles. Nothing but frozen bones, tangled in rusted mail. The wildfire stink had burned into everything. Snowflakes landed, hissed and vanished on the stones. A horn sounded once, high on the wall. Relief this time, not alarm. Ed raised a fist and signaled to the archers to stand down. He met Jon's eyes, searching for old assurances, and Jon managed a nod, though the gesture felt brittle. He tried to find words, but nothing came. No speech, no orders, just the press of the wind and the whisper of the cold inside his mind. Sam finally broke the silence, voice quiet but clear. The wall held. They'll write songs of this night, Jon. Jon almost smiled. No songs, not for us, for the ones who fell, for the ones who stopped the darkness. They made for the tunnel, the way south, knowing the breach would not be truly safe until every threat was met, every passage checked. Ghost scouted ahead, nose low to the ground, hackles bristling at every unfamiliar scent. Sam stuck close, clutching his dagger as if it could answer all the world's riddles. Jon led, feeling the weight of the ice shard at his throat, feeling too the balance within himself. Fire and frost, hope and despair, a soul split and not quite mended. On the tunnel's threshold, the Black Brothers had gathered with axes, crossbows, spears. Some stood ready to bar Jon's way. Others hung back, uncertain. Ed stepped forward, meeting Jon's gaze directly, something fierce and defiant in his eyes. "Lord Commander, is it really you?" Ed's tone was low, grave, ready to become a death sentence or a homecoming. Jon nodded. "It's me. Not a Wight, not a Walker. We have a chance now. But you need to let us through. Sam and I must reach Winterfell. If there's anything left of the Night King's power, it'll go south, seeking shadows, finding cracks. We can't let it rise again." The men hesitated. The firelight flickered across faces battered by exhaustion and fear. In that moment, the brothers seemed as fragile as boys, winter pressing in from every side. At last, Ed gave a brusque nod. "Go on then. We'll hold the gate, what's left of it. We'll see to the wounded, burn the dead. You do what you must, Jon Snow." Jon felt the words settle into him like a second oath. He pressed Sam's shoulder, and together they moved into the passage, Ghost trailing after, the direwolf's tail brushing icy stones. The tunnel was narrow, claustrophobic, walls slick with meltwater, the ceiling dripping. Each step forward sent shivers up John's spine. He wondered if he would ever again know warmth. Real warmth, without the memory of the wall's shadow lurking behind it. They emerged into gray daylight. The world beyond Castle Black, glazed with frost and smoke. Wildlings clustered in small groups, wrapped in furs, faces hollowed by grief and survival. John found Tormund at their head, the giant man stripped of his usual bluster, eyes rimmed red. When he saw John, he grinned, gap-toothed and unbowed. "Crow!" Tormund called, voice echoing across the snow. "Thought you'd gone to the other side. Look at you. Half ghost yourself, eh?" John managed a weak laugh, one that felt good and wrong all at once. "Not a ghost yet. There's work left, Tormund." "Dan." Tormund clapped his hand on John's shoulder, and John almost buckled beneath the weight. Not just of the man, but of everything the gesture meant. "We'll fight with you, all the way south if need be. You saved us, Jon Snow, don't forget that." John shook his head. "No, we only held the darkness for a night. There's more coming, Tormund. I feel it. Something in the cold, looking for a way back. If it can't rise in the north, it'll find another place. Another shape." Tormund's smile faded, and he nodded, grave. "Then let's not stand still. Lead on." Maisiwa. Together they moved, wildlings and black brothers, battered but unbroken. They gathered the horses that survived, few, but enough. John mounted a shaggy gray ghost ranging ahead, Sam clinging behind John on the saddle, books and blades strapped to his belt. The sky above was the dull color of hammered pewter, no sun to be seen. They headed south, away from the wall, away from the ruin of Hardhome, and into the uncertain wilds of the Gift. The ride was slow, every mile hard-won. Frost clung to the branches, bent the grass, glittered in the eyes of crows perched on skeletal trees. Sam shivered behind John, and John could feel the pulse of the shard through the leather, a counter-rhythm to his own heartbeat. John watched the land carefully. He saw things others did not. Animal paths where heat lingered, the places where snow melted fastest and where it froze hardest, the faint shimmer in the air that told of an old enchantment or a threat. The shard gave him sight, but it also gnawed at his peace. Every so often, when the wind turned, he felt the cold rise, trying to unseat the ember in his chest, to swallow it whole. But the fire pushed back, stubborn, unwilling to die again. At dusk on the third day, they camped in a shallow hollow beside a half-frozen stream. Tormund set the watches, and Sam started a fire that burned low and blue, hissing with resin. John sat apart, hood up, staring into the flames. He could not sleep. Had not truly slept since Hardhome. In his mind, the battle played out again and again. The breach, the wave of the dead. Sam's terrified eyes, the Night King's final shatter. In every memory, the cold reached for him. But it was Sam's voice, or Ghost's howl, or the pressure of a friend's hand on his arm that kept him from slipping. Sam settled beside him, knees drawn up, hands held to the fire. "You haven't eaten, John, or rested. You have to try." John looked at him, really looked. Sam's face was lined with fear, exhaustion, resolve. So much love for the world that John felt a lump in his throat. "I don't know how," John admitted. "It's like there's a war inside me, Sam. Cold and fire. Most times I can keep it balanced. Sometimes I can't. I'm afraid what happens if I lose." "Never." Sam reached out, hesitant, then placed his hand on Joan's arm. "You're not alone. Not now. I'll help you. Tormund will help you. Ghost will help you. We've faced worse." John almost laughed. "I'm not sure we have." "Still." Sam's voice was iron, soft but unyielding. "We're here. You're here. And you're not him, John. You're not the Night King. I know if you were." John stared at the fire. The cold in the shard pulsed, but so did the warmth in Sam's hand. He nodded just once and let himself lean into the comfort, if only for a heartbeat. They sat together until the fire died down to embers, and the sky turned indigo and starless. On the fourth day, the land began to change. The snow grew patchier, earth showing through in brown streaks, ice melting faster as they moved south. Villages appeared, first abandoned, then cautiously peopled, then, at last, clusters of men and women with eyes wide at the sight of black cloaks and wildling furs. John gave the word for his company to avoid the main roads, steering instead through woods and over hidden trails, wary of rumor and the whispers that would follow them. South of the wall, every story grew in the telling, and John knew that the tale of the dead's defeat, and of Jon Snow walking alive among the ruins, would travel faster than any raven. At a crossroads near a ruined watchtower, a party of northern scouts found them. John recognized the lead rider, a woman with hair as red as sunset, dressed in furs dyed with the stark sigil. She drew up her horse, eyes darting between John and Ghost, then saluted him with her sword, a crisp, businesslike gesture. "Lord Snow," she said, "I am Lady Lyra of Last Hearth. Sansa Stark sent us to find you. News reached Winterfell of the battle at the wall. Wild tales, but the maesters say there's truth in it. She's waiting for you." Say. Jon's heart gave a painful twist. Sansa, his sister, the last true Stark of the line, waiting for word. For a moment he hesitated. Would she recognize him, now that the cold and the fire fought inside him, now that his face was half shadowed by what he'd become? But there was no choice. He nodded. "Lead on, Lady Lyra." They rode south in column, passing through hamlets where peasants gawked from behind shuttered windows, through woods where the first birds of spring dared tentative song. When at last the towers of Winterfell rose from the mists, Jon felt something in him unclench, as if a frozen knot had begun to thaw. Sansa met them in the yard, flanked by knights and stewards, her hair unbound and streaming over a cloak embroidered with dire wolves. She came forward, her stride purposeful, and Jon swung down from his horse, heart hammering. For a moment, brother and sister simply stared at one another, each searching the other's face for what had changed. Sansa spoke first, her voice clear and certain. "Jon, they said you died. Again. They said the wall fell, and the dead rose and—" She broke off, her composure shattering for an instant. She came to him, seized him by the shoulders, pressed her forehead to his. "But you're here, you're home." Jon let himself breathe. Just breathe. In that moment he was not the Night King's heir, not a commander of Wights, not a myth. He was Jon, her brother. He held her close and let himself feel, really feel, for the first time since Hardhome. Behind them, Tormund grinned and slapped Sam on the back, so hard the maester nearly toppled. Wildlings mingled with Northmen in wary curiosity. Ed spoke with the knight, shaking his head in disbelief at whatever new rumors were being spun. Ghost wandered through the yard, nose twitching, tail high. They entered the hall, the great stone room ablaze with torches and firelight. The smell of roasting meat, of bread and ale, filled the air, a warmth so complete it made Jon dizzy. Sansa pressed him for news, for the truth behind the chaos, and he told her what he could, of Hardhome, of the Night King's defeat, of the balance inside him now. Sansa listened with narrowed eyes, weighing every word. At last, she leaned forward, voice hushed. "And the shard, Jon, the piece you brought south?" Jon touched the pouch at his throat. The cold there was steady, but muted, as if the fires of Winterfell kept it at bay. "It's power, Sansa D. Old power. If left alone, it might wake again. If wielded wrong, it could become another Night King. I don't know how to destroy it." Sansa nodded. "Then we keep it safe. Hidden, if we can. I'll have the maesters look for answers, but until then, you're the only one who can hold it." That night, Jon lay in a chamber of stone, staring at the beams above. Sleep was slow in coming. In dreams, he saw a sea of faces, men and women henned, failed, men and women hand saved. The Night King's blue eyes watched from the darkness, but there was no malice in them now. Only a kind of curiosity, a patience older than words. Spring crept into the land by inches. The days grew brighter. John moved through Winterfell as a ghost at first, shadowed by suspicion and awe, by the questions he could not answer. But slowly, life returned. He walked the ramparts with Sansa, watched children learning swordplay in the yard, listened to Sam's tales of old kings and ancient battles. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, he felt the ice and the fire inside him come close to peace. Yet always the shard hung from his neck, a promise and a warning. He studied it by candlelight, watched the way it fogged the glass, the way frost formed on the wood wherever he set it. Sam and the maesters tried every means to break it, fire, hammers, even spells, but nothing touched it. The cold remained. One evening, as John watched dusk settle across the godswood, Arya returned. She came on silent feet, cloaked in gray, eyes fierce and searching. She found John by the heart tree, where the last red leaves shivered in the breeze. "You came back," Arya said. "Not a question, not an accusation, just a fact." John smiled. "I came back." She studied him, head tilted. "You've changed." He nodded. "I had to." She touched his shoulder, the gesture soft as the touch of a leaf. "But you're still you." They sat together in silence. After a while, Arya spoke again. "Are you afraid of what's next?" John thought about it, watching the sun slip behind the towers. "Yes and no. I think I've learned to be afraid of the right things." Arya smiled, quick and sharp. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." Days became weeks. Messages came from the south, King's Landing in uproar, Cersei's reign challenged by the news from the north, old enemies probing for signs of weakness. Sansa sent riders to every bannerman, called banners not for war but for vigilance. John remained in the north, keeping to the quiet corners, tending to the training yards, riding out with the scouts when wildlings brought news of strangeness in the woods. A village frozen in midsummer, a pond iced over though the sun beat down, animals found with blue glass in their eyes. Each time, John rode out to see for himself. Each time, the cold in the shard pulsed, reaching for whatever new anomaly had appeared. With Sam's help, with Ghost at his side, John tracked these shadows and snuffed them out. Sometimes with fire, sometimes simply with the pressure of his will. The men and women who rode with him learned not to ask questions. They saw enough in the frost that spread from Joan's touch, in the fire that burned in his eyes when he faced down a new horror. Slowly, the land healed. Slowly, the legend of Jon Snow, once dead, now living, fire and frost, in one body, grew. One night, months after the battle at the wall, Jon stood in the godswood again, holding the shard in his hand. He had wrapped it in furs, hoping to dull its chill. But still the air steamed where it touched the earth. Sansa found him there, her cloak trailing red leaves. "You're leaving," she said. Again, not a question. John nodded. "It's time. The land needs peace, and so do I. If I stay, people will keep coming, seeking help, seeking miracles, seeking the end of winter. I'm not the king they need." Sansa smiled, soft and sad. "You've always been more than a king, John. More than a lord, more than a brother. You'll go north." John nodded. "Far north. Where it's quiet. Where I can watch and wait and make sure the cold doesn't rise again." Sansa embraced him, fierce and proud. "We'll remember you, Jon Snow. Always." Arya was waiting at the gate, Ghost beside her. She handed John a blade, light and balanced, the hilt wrapped in leather worn by travel and time. "For luck," she said. "For when the cold gets too close." John smiled, the first true smile in months. "Thank you." Sam and Ed stood on the ramparts waving as John rode out. Tormund and the last of the wildlings joined him for a day, then a week, then faded into the trees, back to their own kind. John rode north, Ghost at his heels, the land falling silent behind him. He crossed old battlefields, walked through ruins where frost lingered in the shadows. In every quiet glen, every frozen stream, he watched for signs of the cold rising. When he found it, he pressed the shard to the earth and willed it away. Fire meeting frost, balance kept. Seasons turned. Snow came and went. The north grew wild again, less a kingdom than a dream, watched over by the last ghost of the wall. Jon Snow walked that dream, fire and frost within, never truly at war, never truly at peace. And in time, men whispered not of the Night King, but of the Wolf of the North, guardian of the realms of men, last shield against the winter. Beneath the auroras, under the gaze of old gods and new, Jon kept watch. His own story, his own legend, written in every breath of cold wind, in every spark of warmth that refused to die. He made his way north beneath the rolling green curtain of the aurora, riding with only ghosts for company. Past the lands men called the Gift, through forests thinned by war and flight, where once men had built crofts and sheep pens, and now the wild reclaimed all with moss and snow. The spring the south claimed had not yet reached these woods. Here the wind held the old taste of ice, and the rivers still carried floating panes of glass. Jon felt no fear in the solitude. The hush suited the uneasy ache inside him, the strange coexistence of warmth and chill that set him apart from both the living and the dead. He took his rest beneath ancient trees, curling into the hollow of roots, as ghosts curled close, white fur pressed to his side. Some nights he slept, fitful, shallow, waking with the feel of ice in his veins, or the memory of Sam's voice calling him back from a dream of endless night. Other nights he did not sleep at all. He stared at the stars, at the shifting lights above, and turned the shard of the Night King in his palm, feeling the weight and power of it, the secret cold that would not die. As days blurred to weeks, he lost the habit of words. He spoke only to Ghost, who answered with a wag of his tail, a nudge of his nose, a warning growl, when shadows moved beyond the firelight. When hunger called, Jon hunted. He learned the land's silent ways, where the hares burrowed, where fish sheltered beneath ice, where blackberries would ripen once the snow at last gave way. He learned, too, to watch for things that should not be, places where frost clung thickest, where small bones lay in patterns too neat for nature, where the air felt suddenly sharp as broken glass. It was in such a place, deep in the silent woods east of the shivering sea, that he first felt the cold begin to gather again. The day was cloudless, the sun riding low and pale behind the tangled branches. Jon walked ahead of Ghost, bow in hand, feet muffled by old pine needles. He had seen the tracks. Small, sharp, a deer's, maybe a yearling, and had followed them to a frozen pond ringed with ancient birch. He was drawing an arrow when Ghost stiffened beside him, hackles up, nose quivering. Jon paused, reading the air. Not fear, not quite. More a question, a memory, a scent that tickled at something older than words. He crept forward, arrow ready, and saw the pond rimmed in perfect white frost, though the day was almost warm enough for melting. On the far side, a deer lay sprawled, limbs twisted, a rim of hoarfrost clinging to its eyes. Jon circled, careful, and crouched by the carcass. The flesh was untouched. No wound, no blood, only a chill so deep his breath smoked on the air. He reached into his cloak for the shard, unwrapped it from its fur. The ice glimmered blue, pulsing faintly. The same slow rhythm had come to know. When he held it close to the deer, the shard grew colder, the pulse faster. Something here had tried to call it. Something here had remembered the power of the Night King, or the memory of that power, and hungered to bring it back. Jon crouched by the deer, pressed his free hand to the earth. He closed his eyes, letting the ember in his chest flare, letting the warmth spread through his fingers. Beneath his palm, the frost began to melt, steaming, the chill drawing away from the body, leaving only death, clean and empty. The shard pulsed, slower now, and Jon wrapped it again, tucking it safe. He rose, eyes sweeping the clearing. Ghost watched, ears flat, as if waiting for something to move among the trees. But nothing came. Not this time. He moved on, circling wide around the place where the cold had lingered. That night, as he built his fire, he turned the event over and over in his mind, searching for meaning. The shard, he realized, was not only a danger. It was a beacon, a lure for whatever shadows the Night King had left behind. He would have to be careful, or one day he might draw something even he could not defeat. He pushed on, further north. The land grew stranger, more empty. Ruins of wildling villages appeared and vanished. Stone circles half buried in snow, fires that had not burned for years. Once, he came upon the bones of a mammoth, picked clean, ribs rising from the earth like the ruins of some long-forgotten cathedral. The old world, he thought, had never truly left this place. It waited, silent, under the snow, dreaming of return. In the long dusk of an early summer night, John reached the foot of the Frostfangs, the mountains rising black and blue against the horizon, veined with ancient ice. He made camp at the edge of a stream, Ghost drinking beside him, the water cold enough to numb his hand. He built a fire, ate what little he had, and lay awake, staring at the stars. It was there in the deep watches of the night that the cold came again, stronger this time, not a memory, but a presence. He woke to Ghost's growl. The direwolf standing bristled at the camp's edge, eyes fixed on the shadows beneath the trees. John rose silently, unsheathing the blade Arya had given him, the shard of the Night King cold against his chest. He peered into the dark, letting his own senses stretch outward, searching for heat, for movement, for that telltale wrongness that came when death did not belong. The air was still, heavy with the scent of snowmelt. At first he saw nothing. Then, just at the edge of vision, shapes moved, pale, thin, drifting from trunk to trunk, eyes dark and empty. Wights, he realized, not many, but enough. 6, maybe 8, moving with the slow, relentless hunger he remembered from Hardhome. And behind them, fainter still, a walker, blue eyes burning like ice. John's mouth went dry. He had thought them all destroyed when the Night King fell, but now he saw something had survived, some fragment of will, some remnant of ancient patient power, still clung to the cold, refusing to die. He stood, flame and frost warring in his chest, and called softly, "Ghost." The direwolf came to his side, teeth bared, muscles bunched for the fight. John unslung the shard, unwrapped it, and held it in his left hand, sword in his right. The Wights came on, slow but inexorable. The walker hung back, watching, head tilted like a bird. John stepped forward, feeling the ember inside him flare. He focused on the shard, pouring heat into it, daring it to answer, to try and claim him. The ice pulsed harder, fighting back, seeking to call the Wights to it. John pushed, gritting his teeth, feeling his body tremble with the strain. The first Wight lunged, a girl, or what had been a girl, hair tangled with frost, hands curled into claws. John met her with Arya's blade, slicing cleanly through bone and sinew. Another came, and another. Ghost leapt beside him, jaws snapping, dragging one down and shaking it until the spine broke. John fought, not with rage, but with cold precision, each blow deliberate, each movement a dance between fire and ice. The walker watched, expressionless. As John cut down the last Wight, it raised a hand, as if in benediction, and stepped forward, blade of pure ice gleaming in the starlight. John steadied himself, gripping both sword and shard, waiting. The walker circled, cautious. John felt the cold rising from it, an ancient, endless winter that remembered every night, every death, every sorrow the world had known. He let the ember in his chest blaze bright and hot, meeting the cold with the warmth of everything he'd loved. His family, his friends, the memory of Ghost's fur, Arya's laughter, Sam's steadfastness. For a heartbeat, they stood locked. Fire and ice, memory and oblivion, the last of the walkers and the last man to defy them. Then John lunged. Steel met ice with a shriek. The walker parried, fast as thought, blade skating along Arya's steel. John felt the shard pull at him, trying to tip him into cold. But he fought it back, sweat stinging his eyes, every muscle burning. He fainted left, ducked under a sweeping blow, then rose, driving the shard into the walker's chest. For an instant, nothing happened. The walker's eyes widened, surprise perhaps, or something close to awe. Then the ice cracked, spreading from the point of contact, fissures running like lightning through blue flesh. The walker tried to pull away, but John held on, forcing the shard deeper, pouring every ounce of warmth into the breach. The walker's mouth opened, and a sound came, not a scream, not a cry, but a sigh, the last breath of winter. The body crumbled, falling to shards that steamed and vanished on the ground. The cold retreated, drawn into the shard, the weight of it growing heavy in Joan's palm. The last Wight collapsed, bones folding in upon themselves, the hunger gone at last. He fell to his knees, breath coming hard, heart pounding so fiercely he thought it might break free of his chest. Ghost whined, licking his hand. John dropped the shard, watched it smoke where it touched the snow. The ice was black now, the light within it flickering low. Whatever power had survived, whatever shadow of the Night King had lingered, was trapped now inside the crystal, contained, dormant for the moment. He wrapped the shard in furs, tucked it away, and slumped by the fire, shivering with exhaustion. Ghost lay beside him, head on Joan's chest, heart steady and warm. For a long time John lay awake, staring at the sky, listening to the crackle of dying flames. In the days that followed, John moved further into the mountains, seeking a place to bury the shard. A place deep, remote, beyond the reach of any who might seek its power. He climbed icy slopes, crossed frozen rivers, lost track of time as the land grew wilder and the stars brighter. In a high valley where the snow lay untouched, and the only sounds were the wind and the distant howls of wolves, he found a cave, half hidden behind a curtain of icicles. Inside, the walls glittered with ancient frost. At the cave's deepest point, John dug with his bare hands, scooping out earth and stone, cursing the pain and the cold, until at last he had made a hollow deep enough to hide the shard forever. He set the crystal inside, wrapped in furs, and covered it with stones. He pressed his hand to the cairn, feeling the pulse of the cold within, and whispered a prayer. To the old gods, to the new, to the memory of the friend he had been. Let it end, he said. Let the cold rest. Let the dead sleep. Let the living find peace. He stood, knees aching, and made his way back to the mouth of the cave. Ghost waited, eyes bright. John scratched the direwolf's ears, then turned to the wind, feeling its clean bite on his face. He walked south, toward the woods, toward the lands where men still built fires against the night. The weight was lighter now, the balance inside him more steady, as if the world itself had turned a corner into the light. Time passed. Seasons turned. Summer, brief and fierce, came to the far north, melting rivers, flooding valleys with green. John built a shelter near the edge of the world, hunting, fishing, living with the wild things. He grew lean, hard, silent. Ghost kept watch at night, eyes bright with vigilance. John found peace of a kind. In the long days and longer nights, in the solitude of a world remade. Sometimes travelers came, wildlings, trappers, men who remembered the old stories. They found John sitting by his fire, his hair streaked with silver, his eyes deep with secrets. They spoke of ghosts and gods, of kings who walked in death, of a wolf who watched the cold and kept it at bay. John listened, sometimes smiled, always careful. He told them only what they needed to hear, that the north was safe, that the dead would not rise, that the world could rest. And yet, always, he watched the sky. He listened to the wind. He kept the memory of the cold close, never letting it slip into carelessness. He knew, better than any, that winter was not truly vanquished, only sleeping, waiting for some future age to test the walls men built against the dark. He wrote letters to Winterfell when the snows allowed, telling Sansa of his life, of the wild things and the peace he'd found, of the days that grew longer, the stars that shone brighter. He asked after Arya, after Sam, after all the old friends whose lives had twined with his. Sometimes replies came, sometimes not. But he treasured each one, holding them close against the loneliness that sometimes crept in on cold nights. He marked the years by the stars, by the return of the birds in spring, by the slow, steady greening of the woods. He let his hair grow long, his beard wild. His hands grew rough, his eyes sharper. He grew old, or something like old, though the fire in his chest kept him strong. The cold in his heart kept him wary. Ghost never left him. The direwolf grew gray, then white as snow, his muzzle flecked with age, but his eyes never lost their brightness. When John hunted, Ghost hunted with him. When John sat by the fire, Ghost pressed close. They were each other's only family now, and that was enough. One night, years after the last cold shadow faded from the north, John sat beneath the aurora, fire crackling at his feet, Ghost asleep beside him. He looked to the sky and wondered if the world would remember him, or if he would become only another ghost among the many the snow had claimed. He took up the old blade Arya had given him, running his fingers over the leather grip, remembering her smile, her fierce promise. He closed his eyes, feeling the balance inside him. Fire and frost, memory and hope. In the silence, he whispered a final prayer. Not for himself, but for all those who had gone before, for all those who would come after. Remember, he said. Remember what we faced. Remember what we saved. The aurora danced above, a river of green and gold, and the cold wind carried his words across the wild lands, where they would linger long after he was gone. In time, legends grew in the north. A wolf who watched the winter, a man who walked alone, keeping the cold at bay. Some called him the last king, others the first ghost, others still a guardian whose watch would never truly end. But Jon Snow knew better. He was only a man who had seen the world's end, who had come back with both fire and ice in his heart, and who in the end had chosen to live. In the years that followed, when the cold wind howled and the snows fell deep, the people of the north lit their fires a little brighter, told their children stories of Jon and Ghost, and faced the night with hope in their hearts. And in the far north, beneath the dancing lights, Jon Snow kept his watch, silent and steady, the shard of the Night King buried deep in the mountain, the memory of winter held close but never unleashed. He was at peace, at last, and the land, for a little while, was at peace as well. Hey? He moved through the slow-turning seasons, unnoticed and unneeded, a shadow among pines and snowdrifts, an old black cloak, threadbare with wind and sun. Time became a river in Jon's memory, not a measured thing, but a ceaseless drift. Days blurred to years, and the world south of the Frostfangs forgot his name, except in the low voices of travelers around their fires, or the old stories told at Winterfell to children who shivered delight in the dark. Jon built no home, nor claimed any land, but the wild and haunted north accepted him in ways no keep nor hall had ever done. The woods and high slopes became his walls. He learned again the language of silence, the warning click of a ptarmigan's wings in the dusk, the snap of hoarfrost from a branch under the weight of his passing, the ripple of a trout beneath clear ice. Ghost hunted alone some days, returning with his muzzle streaked red or white with frost. Sometimes they traveled together for weeks without meeting another soul, speaking only in looks and the brush of fur against hand. The world was changing, slow but inexorable. Spring came earlier each year. The snows melted into the earth sooner, feeding a green tide that pushed up through the moss and lichen. The woods filled with birds whose ancestors had not known these mountains for centuries. Sometimes Jon watched the sun set late, sky streaked gold and violet, thinking how south of the wall they would be bringing in barley, children chasing lambs in the meadow. He wondered if Sansa's hair still shone bright as copper in the sun, if Arya still wandered, though now always east, beyond the grasp of any story Jon could imagine. News came on rare winds. Once, a band of wildling hunters found him camped beside the icy blue pool of a glacial lake. Their leader was a woman called Hala, broad-shouldered and bare-armed, with hair as pale as snow and a face marked with scars and laughter. She brought with her a skin of sour ale, and a tale of a night spent in Winterfell's hall, where she traded smoked elk for bread and salt and heard Sansa Stark speak. Queen in the north now, they said, though Jon saw her face as it had been, dusted with frost and set in unflinching resolve. He asked Halla if she was well, if she spoke of him. She did not speak your name, Halla answered, but she burned a candle for the lost and the wandering. She told us no debt of the old time is ever forgotten in the north. Halla's voice softened. There was a ghost in her eyes, I think. You should go back, Crow. But Jon shook his head. My place is here. The old cold might sleep. But I've seen what wakes when men forget to be wary. He touched the leather pouch at his throat, where the black shard lay cold as ever. Halla nodded, the respect of one exile to another. Years passed. The stories reached him, sometimes true, sometimes wild as summer lightning. The South was changing too. New lords, new lines, the queen at King's Landing replaced again and again. Tormund was said to have led a band of free folk across the Bay of Seals, sailing west in search of a land where even the old gods had never walked. Ed died in his bed, Sam's letters told, having lived long enough to see his daughter grow into a maester herself. Sam wrote less and less, and one year, the ravens ceased altogether. Jon felt the ache of that silence, but it was a clean pain. Life's cost, not the old emptiness of loss. He did not age quickly, though his hair grew silver and his eyes deepened with lines of sun and storm. The balance within him, the fire and frost, remained a gentle tension. In summer, he felt the cold as blessing, letting him cross ice fields when others would have perished. In winter, the fire kept his bones from aching and his breath from fogging the air. Yet he never tested its limits, never called on it for more than the smallest comfort, never let himself imagine what the world would become if he chose otherwise. One autumn, he came down from the high slopes to find the forest alive with color: birch gold, aspen scarlet, and the deep indigo of mountain juniper. He paused by a stream, drinking from his cupped hands, and caught his reflection in the water. A face older, thinner, marked by weather and solitude, yet still recognizably Jon Snow. Ghost waded in beside him, lapping at the current, eyes meeting Jon's in the glass of the water. For a moment Jon felt the old ache, what it would have been to ride south again, to see Winterfell rising from the mists. But the thought faded. There were too many ghosts behind those gates, too many memories that would not let him rest. His place was here, where the world was as it had been before any king's banner flew. It was not always peace. The wild still held its shadows. On a night when the moon was hidden and the sky burned with green auroras, Jon woke to the scent of blood. Ghost was already gone, a white streak through the dark. Jon followed, feet silent as snow, past the last line of wind-stunted pines and out onto the barren ice field. He found the bodies by the edge of a frozen tarn. 3 wildling men and a woman, faces blue, mouths frozen open, eyes glassy. Their blood had stained the ice in patterns Jon had seen before, twisting sigils that felt both ancient and new. Ghost prowled nearby, hackles raised, growling at the darkness beyond the pool. Jon knelt, studying the marks. No tracks led away from the place. The cold here was unnatural, deeper than the night itself. He touched the ice, felt it bite through skin and sinew straight to the shard at his throat. The power in it stirred, faint but unmistakable. A call and a warning. He did not sleep that night. He sat by his fire, blade across his knees, Ghost at his back. In the dark he listened for footsteps, for the echo of old enemies. But the night remained empty, and by dawn, the wind had scattered the blood. The cold had faded, and the dead were only dead. Such things happened every few years. Signs, warnings, moments when the world seemed about to tip back into darkness. Each time, Jon sought out the place, using the fire in his chest to chase away the unnatural cold, using the shard's presence to draw the shadows out. Sometimes he found only frost, a patch of ice that melted at his touch. Other times he found animals gone mad, eyes blue and blind, who fell before Ghost's teeth and Jon's careful blade. He buried everyone, burned what he could, never letting himself forget the danger of what still slept beneath the land. When he could, he sent word to Sansa. Once a year, when the thaw came and the rivers ran clear, he carved a message into a birch bark scroll and gave it to a wildling to carry south. The messages were brief. The land is quiet, the shadows sleep. Ghost is well, I am well. Some years he received a reply, written in Sansa's careful hand, telling of weddings and harvests, of battles fought and won, of children born to lords he would never know. She never urged him to return, only told him that his memory was honored, that the North remembered him, that a candle always burned for him in the godswood. In one such message she wrote, "Arya has not returned. Her last raven came from the far east, across the narrow sea. She hunts her own ghosts now, but she is well, and she loves you." Jon wept at that, a rare and silent grief that left him empty and new. For days he wandered the hills, letting the wind scour his face, letting the ache turn to acceptance. He knew then that he would never see her again. Not in this life, not in this world, but he felt her presence sometimes. A shadow at his back, a whisper on the wind. Years slipped by. The world changed. New faces came north, trappers and traders and wildlings, seeking the promise of land untouched by lord or king. They found Jon sometimes, an old man now, silent but watchful, his direwolf at his side. Some recognized him, though he never gave his name. They called him the White Wolf, the Ghost King, the Watcher on the Edge. He accepted their offerings of food or news, shared his fire, told no tales, asked no questions. Most went south again before winter, eager for softer living. Some stayed, building tiny settlements among the ruins, raising children who never knew the old terrors. On a day when the snow was soft and the sky so blue it hurt the eyes, Jon came upon a child in the woods. A boy no older than 6, lost and shivering beneath a spruce. He had wandered from his family's camp, following rabbit tracks too far. Jon found him half frozen, cradled him in his cloak, carried him back to the fire. The boy stared at Ghost with wide eyes, awe and fear mingled. "Is he yours?" "We belong to each other," Jon said. The boy nodded. And when his father came, white with terror and gratitude, Jon saw in the man's face the lines of the old free folk, and in the boy's eyes the hope of a world that had never known the Night King's march. They shared bread and salt before the fire. The man spoke of wolves and winter, of the hard life north of the wall, but also of hope. There are no more monsters, they say. The Queen keeps her word. We're free to make our own fate. Nuts. Jon smiled at that, thinking of Sansa, thinking of all the long roads that had brought them here. "Be watchful," he said. "Peace is a garden. You must tend it every day, or weeds will come." The man nodded. "And you? Will you stay?" Jon looked into the fire, the old ache rising. "As long as I'm needed," he said. "And a little longer, I think." The years narrowed to seasons, seasons to days marked by small joys. The crunch of new snow, the crackle of a fire, the weight of Ghost's head on his knee. He taught himself to carve wood, to shape bone into needles and hooks, to find beauty in simple things. In the spring he fished the meltwater streams. In the summer he gathered cloudberries and wild onions. In the autumn he watched the geese fly south, and the elk rut on the high meadows. In winter he hunted, prowling the woods with Ghost, the only white shape more silent than the falling snow. He dreamed often of Bran, who he sometimes glimpsed in the mind of a raven, a presence wise and distant, of Arya sailing east beneath alien stars, of Sam, growing old among books and daughters, of Sansa, steadfast as winter, watching over her people. In those dreams, Jon was always walking, sometimes on the wall, sometimes across green meadows, sometimes through the endless snow. Sometimes he wore black, sometimes white, sometimes the armor of a king, sometimes the rags of an outlaw. But always, always, he walked forward, never looking back. As the decades drew on, the wild things grew, used to his presence. Bears lumbered by his camp without fear, Birds nested in the eaves of his lean-to. Once, a great gray owl landed on his arm, tilting its head as if in greeting. He stroked its feathers, feeling the ancient pulse of life and death in its bones. Ghost aged with him, growing slower, his muzzle gone silver, eyes clouded but still bright. When at last the dire wolf's time came, John dug a grave beneath the tallest pine, wrapped Ghost in his own cloak, and sang the old song the free folk had taught him. He sat by the grave through the night, listening to the wolves howling on the far hills, feeling the ache of loss and the comfort of memory mingling in his chest. After that, John was truly alone. Yet he did not despair. He felt Ghost with him in every hunt, in every dream. Sometimes, at dawn, he saw the wolf's shape in the mist, watching, waiting. In the end, John grew old. Older than most men. His hair long and white, his face seamed with weather and time. His hands grew stiff, his stride slow, but the fire and frost inside him kept his senses sharp, his wits keen. He grew content in his solitude, but never complacent. He watched the world, tended the peace, kept the balance. One morning, as the first snows of winter began to fall, John felt the cold in the earth stir. Just a whisper, just a warning. He rose, wrapped himself in furs, took up Arya's blade, and walked to the high valley where he had buried the shard so many years before. The cairn was undisturbed, stones laced with new frost, snow drifting in gentle swirls. John knelt, pressed his hand to the cold and listened. For a moment he thought he heard the old music, the song of ice, the call of winter. But it faded, passing into silence. He stood, leaning on his blade, and looked out over the valley. The sky was alive with light, the aurora shimmering green and gold above the mountains. He felt no fear, no longing, only gratitude, and a peace he had not known since boyhood. He walked back to his camp, built a fire, and sat watching the flames. Night came early in the high north, but the fire burned warm, and the cold outside was only a memory. In the morning, the snow had covered his tracks, and the world was quiet and new. South of the Frostfangs, in Winterfell, Sansa Stark woke before dawn. She sat by the window in the Godswood, looking out at the falling snow, a candle burning beside her. She felt in that moment the passing of something old and precious, a farewell whispered on the wind. She bowed her head, said the old words, and let the tears fall for the brother she had loved, the king she had lost, and the ghost who had watched the night for them all. In the years that followed, stories spread across the north, of a white wolf and a man with snow-white hair who watched the wild, who kept the darkness at bay, who never sought a crown but wore one all the same. Children grew, learned the old songs, tended the peace. Winter came and went, but never with the same hunger as before. In a quiet valley beneath the dancing lights, where the last cairn marked the old world's edge, a pine tree grew taller than any in the land. The birds nested in its branches, the foxes denned in its roots, and in spring, wildflowers bloomed all around. And somewhere perhaps, the memory of Jon Snow washed with them, fire and frost forever in his heart, keeping the balance, guarding the world until the end of days. Kai, the deep north, was his solitude. He watched the winter pass into spring, and then, with the patience of old gods, watched spring pass into winter again, each cycle more distant from the world of kings and castles than the last. The days of desperate survival and hard riding faded behind him. He hunted when he needed meat, fished the cold streams when they ran clear, let the wildness soak into his bones, and the silence mend what little inside him could be mended. No word came from the south for many years. Sometimes in the evenings Jon sat by the fire and remembered voices, Sansa's calm steadiness, Sam's laughter, Arya's quick jests. He wondered about them, sent hopes out into the night, but never left the north. He had chosen to become a memory, a shape moving among pines and frozen rivers, a man with no banner and no claim. Ghost's presence kept him rooted, the old wolf still his only living companion. But even Ghost grew slower, more silent, eyes clouding, the primeval wildness giving way to a deep and abiding peace. One spring, a new voice entered his solitude. It was dusk, the river golden and the sky behind the frost fangs, a canvas of drifting red and gold. John was skinning a trout by his campfire when he heard cautious steps in the brush. Light, clever, careful. Ghost raised his head but did not growl. John did not reach for his blade. He knew the sounds of men who wished to kill, or steal, or beg. This was none of those. It was a voice from childhood, softer now, older. She stepped into the firelight, hood down, hair short and tangled, eyes sharp as ice. Arya. The face had changed with the world, older, weathered by hard miles, but her gaze was his sister's, and she smiled the old way, crooked and knowing. "You're a hard man to find," she said, squatting near the fire and holding her hands out to the warmth. "I went east, then north again. I thought you might be a ghost after all." John felt tears burn behind his eyes. He blinked them away, but Arya saw. "You're here," he said. It was all he managed, but she understood. "I am. Sansa sends her love. Bran too in his way. Sam writes books so thick no man will ever finish them. You should see him, he's almost as wide as Hodor was." John barked a laugh, and Ghost stirred, snuffling Arya's boots before settling again, satisfied. Arya looked at the woods, at the old snow between roots. "It's beautiful here. I've seen 1,000 places, John, and I've never seen anything like this. It's like the end of the world, or the beginning." "It's both," he answered. They talked as the night deepened, voices low, the flames painting their faces in gold and umber. Arya told of ships and sands, of temples where the dead walked, and cities where magic was sold by the ounce. She spoke of wars, petty, noble, pointless, of finding herself, and then losing herself, and then finding herself again. John told of the north, of the places where the cold whispered warnings and the trees seemed to know his name. He told her of the cold that sometimes woke in the earth, and the times he'd stood watch at the edge of a frozen hollow, feeling the old power pulse like a heartbeat below the snow. Arya listened, her face grave. "Is it gone truly? The Night King, the others?" "I think so," John said, "but it would be a lie to say I know for certain. Some things sleep, Arya, but they don't die. I've seen places where the ice felt wrong. I've felt the shard pulse, but never as strong as when we were young." Arya nodded, picking up a stick and turning it in the embers. "Bran says much the same. He dreams the old dreams, trees and crows and winter that never ends. But he also dreams of green things, of the wall covered in vines, of wildlings and northerners, and free folk raising children with no fear of the dark." "And Manderstashting." John closed his eyes, letting the picture settle in his mind. "It could be one day. I hope so." They slept beside the fire, Arya curled in a spare fur cloak, Ghost between them. In the morning, John made tea from wild mint, and they shared bread and dried apples. The sun shone weak and yellow through the pines. Arya stood, stretching her arms wide. "I should go back soon. Sansa worries if I'm gone more than a year, and Bran gets cross when the crows don't return." "Nah, stay a few days," John said. She did, and together they hunted, fished, walked the old animal trails. Arya moved through the forest as if she'd been born to it. They spoke little during the days. Words not needed, their presence enough. Arya showed him tricks she'd learned in distant cities. How to find water by watching birds, how to mend a cut with spider silk. John showed her the high places where the view stretched to the edge of the world. One evening, they climbed a stony ridge and looked out across the great expanse, the frost fang's teeth white against the sky, the forests dark and endless, the rivers coiling like silver wire through the green. John felt at peace, for the first time in years. Arya leaned against his shoulder, the way she had as a child. "You're not alone here," she said. John shook his head. "Not alone. Not with Ghost, not with the memories, not now." They sat until the stars pricked through the dusk, and John remembered a song their mother used to hum, a song of the north, of the old ways. Arya hummed along, quiet and sure, her voice blending with his, the words fading into the night. The next morning, Arya packed her things. She clasped John's forearm. "You're needed here," she said. "But if you ever wish to come south, you will always have a home in Winterfell. Always." He nodded, unable to speak, and watched her vanish into the trees. For a long while, he listened for her footsteps, but the forest swallowed her sound, as it always did. Time folded again. Seasons passed. Summer brief and green, autumn sharp with red leaves, winter deep and long. Jon grew older. His hair turned white as ghosts' pelt. The fire and frost within him ebbed and flowed, but neither ever conquered the other. He saw no sign of the old power for many years. The land seemed to heal. Rivers ran clear. Animals bred in abundance. The new free folk built small steadings on the edge of the wild. Occasionally Jon visited their camps, sharing meat and stories, showing children how to carve arrows or set traps. The old ones called him the White Wolf, the Watcher, the Ghost King. They left offerings at the cairn where the shard lay buried. Small bones, tokens, flowers in spring. Sometimes in dreams, Jon saw Bran's face, a raven's eyes, a smile both boyish and ancient. Sometimes the dreams were of Sansa, her hair shot through with silver, her children laughing in the yard at Winterfell. Sometimes he saw Arya, riding the waves, her blade flashing in the sunlight, a wolf running at her side. Ghost faded slowly, sleepier each year. One autumn morning, Jon found the wolf curled beneath a pine, breathing shallow, eyes watching the rising sun. Jon knelt, hand on Ghost's fur, feeling the last slow heartbeat. When it stopped, Jon wept. Real, bitter tears, the grief of a life's worth of companionship ending. He buried Ghost beneath the tallest pine, beside the cairn. He sang the free folk song again, then sat for days, letting the world pass. When hunger returned, he rose and walked the woods, each step a little heavier. After Ghost's passing, Jon saw the world differently. Every small thing brighter, every sound sharper. He noticed the way the ice cracked on the river at dusk, the patterns of lichen on stone, the flicker of bat wings at twilight. He felt, too, the subtle thrum of the old power, softer now, like a lullaby in the earth. One winter, a band of strangers came north. A lordling's party with dogs and banners and fine cloaks. They were hunting stories as much as game. The Ghost King, the last of the Night's Watch, the man who'd turned winter away. They found Jon by his fire, offered him wine and sweet cakes, asked for tales of the Night King and the Wall. Jon listened, smiled, and told them what he could. Not of kings and monsters, but of the patience of the cold, the stubbornness of life, the peace found in balance. The lordling grew bored, but one of the women, a healer, stayed up late, listening, her eyes wide. In the morning, she thanked him, and when they left, she pressed a dried rose into his hand. He kept it, tucked among his few possessions. He thought of Ygritte, of love lost and found, and wondered what it would be to live another life, one with hearth and home and children. The thought was gentle, not painful. Years turned. Jon's steps grew slower. His hair grew long, his beard thick, his voice low and rough. Children came to see the Ghost King. Brave, curious, asking questions he often answered with a riddle or a smile. Once, in the dead of winter, a girl brought him a bundle of arrows, tied with blue ribbon. She said her grandmother told stories of a boy with a white wolf who kept her village safe. Jon taught her how to nock an arrow, how to follow tracks in snow. In spring, the rivers flooded, and the sky filled with birds returning. Jon walked each day, less for hunting than for memory. He thought of the wall, how it must be crumbling, how the world turned without it. He thought of the old gods, the faces in the weirwood, and how peace, like winter, never truly ended. One night, as the aurora danced, Jon sat by his fire, the last embers glowing. He felt the cold in the earth stir, but softer now, less a threat than a promise. He closed his eyes, breathing slow and deep, the balance of fire and frost inside him steady and sure. In the morning they found him by the fire, white-haired and peaceful. his cloak wrapped around his shoulders, Arya's blade in his lap. The sun was rising, the sky full of birdsong, and the frost had already begun to melt. They buried him beside Ghost and the cairn, raising a simple marker of stone and wood. In time, the forest reclaimed the place. Flowers grew, animals gathered. The children told stories of the Ghost King, the Watcher, the last wolf of the north. In Winterfell, Sansa felt his passing as a gentle hush, a memory of snow and old songs. She lit a candle in the godswood, whispering the words her mother had taught her, letting her tears fall into the roots of the old tree. Arya, far across the sea, paused on the deck of her ship, felt the wind shift, and smiled into the spray. Bran, in his chamber of ravens and roots, opened his eyes, and for a moment, the world seemed perfectly balanced. Fire and frost, light and dark, all held in the heart of a single quiet soul. And in the wild north, beneath the aurora, the land slept, watched over by the memory of a man who had saved it and never claimed a crown. Peace held as long as it could, and the snows that followed were gentle, forgiving, and full of light. Unpay. There was a dawn so clear and silent, it seemed the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break or begin. The light spilled gold and blue across the snows north of the Frostfangs, where the forests grew so dense, the sun was often only a ghost among branches. In the high valley where Jon Snow's cairn rested, the snow had melted early that spring, revealing pale green shoots struggling upward, a wild tangle of crocus and heather blooming among pine needles and old stone. Birds sang above, gray jays and willow warblers, and a fox with a patchwork coat sniffed along the edges of the cairn, pausing, then bounding away into thicket. It was a place out of time, a place shaped by memory as much as by wind or frost. In the first years after Jon Snow's passing, few came that far north. Word spread slowly. The Ghost King was gone. The White Wolf slept beneath the tallest pine, alongside the cairn of the Old Cold. Some few wildlings visited in summer, leaving little offerings, tokens of bone and carved wood, or sprays of spring flowers. They spoke in low voices, as if afraid to wake the magic of the place, and those who lingered after sunset sometimes dreamed of a white wolf passing through the trees, or a man's silhouette outlined in firelight against the snows. The world turned on without him. At Winterfell, Sansa grew gray, then white-haired, her own children and grandchildren spinning out new lives in the halls, where once the banners of Stark had snapped in winter wind. There was peace in the north, more enduring than in any other part of Westeros, and the tales of the old wars, of the long night, the wildlings' flight, the king beyond the wall, became stories told at feasts to children who laughed and clutched at each other's sleeves. Every few years, Arya returned, her hair streaked silver now, her smile changed but undimmed. She came quietly, slipping into the godswood at dusk, never staying more than the moon's turning. She walked the halls as if she owned them, sparred with the guards and the steward's sons, ran a whetstone over her old blade needle, and then vanished as suddenly as she came. The lords of the north whispered about her, but no one dared gainsay her. Some nights, she climbed the battlements to watch the northern sky, her sharp eyes searching the darkness for lights she remembered from another life. Bran the Broken watched too, though his eyes were the eyes of crows and the roots of ancient trees. He was old. So old that sometimes even the ravens forgot to croak his coming, and his hair was as white as the first frost. His body grew thin and brittle, but in dreams he flew across the land, over Winterfell and the wild rivers, over the haunted hills and the green barrows. He watched over the cairn in the north, where the cold still slumbered beneath earth and memory. In the free folk villages scattered through the new green valleys of the Gift, people prospered as they never had before. They built with stone now, not just bone and turf, and their children grew up never knowing the lash or the leash. Sometimes, when the nights were long and the wind howled, the old women would gather the young around a fire and tell stories of the White Wolf, how he had brought down the Night King and kept watch when even the bravest men faltered. They told of Ghost, the wolf who would not die, and of Jon's silent vigil in the north, holding the last sliver of winter at bay. And yet the world was not without shadow. In the great cities of the south, King's Landing rebuilt, Old Town bustling, Gull Town alive with ships, men and women grew restless in times of peace. New kings and queens rose and fell. Councils schemed, old hatreds smoldered beneath the surface. Once, word came of a southern lord who claimed descent from Danare's Stormborn and dreamed of dragons returning to the world. The maesters dismissed it, and the snow kept falling in the north. But power, like winter, was never truly gone, only hidden, waiting for the moment when the world's vigilance slipped. In the far north, seasons passed in their slow, patient way. In the deepest winter, storms rolled down from the pole, burying valleys in white so thick even the wildlings shuttered their doors and waited for thaw. The cairn where Jon Snow rested was buried beneath drifts that no sun could touch. Yet sometimes, in the silence after a storm, a shape would move among the pines. A great white wolf perhaps, or a shadow passing with the wind. One year, long after the last who had known Jon in life were gone, a boy came north with his father. A trapper seeking furs, a boy restless for adventure. The boy was quick and clever, with a scar down his cheek and a love for stories of the old days. They followed the river's bend, deeper into the woods than any map would take them, and stumbled at dusk upon the cairn in the high valley. The father wanted to turn back, but the boy felt the hush of the place, a sacredness that filled him with awe. They camped by the cairn, laying their fire low and quiet. The boy dreamed that night of snow falling soft and steady, of a man in black with a white wolf at his side, standing at the edge of the firelight, watching but not coming closer. In the dream, the man looked at him, and there was kindness in his eyes, sadness but something strong beneath it. The boy woke before dawn, the world cold and new. When he told his father, the man only nodded, and together they left a carved bone at the cairn, a token for the old gods, or for the ghost that lingered there. South of the wall, life spun on. New songs were sung in Winterfell's great hall. New banners hung from the ramparts, and the land was rich with barley and rye, with fruit in summer and thick snow in winter. Yet always, in the coldest months, when the wind moaned down from the frost fangs and the trees creaked like bones, some would remember. They would light a candle at the window and say a quiet prayer. To the white wolf, to Jon Snow, to the one who watched the night and kept the cold away. Arya returned in the last years of her life. She was old now, her hair silver and thin, her eyes deep and dark. She walked alone up the King's Road, past villages that had sprung up since her youth, past new-built inns and shrines to the mother and the stranger. She carried no blade now, but a walking stick, and she leaned on it as she made her way north. The guards at Winterfell let her pass without question. Sansa was gone now. Bran too, the next generation ruling wisely, the Stark blood strong in the land. Arya passed the great hall, paused in the godswood to run her fingers over the old weirwood's face, and then slipped from the castle before dawn. She made her way north, moving slow but steady, her heart fixed on the memory of a brother lost, a home found and left again, a world forever balanced on the edge of blade and snow. She found the cairn at last, climbed the ridge, and sat beside it as the sun set, breathing in the scent of pine and old ice. She stayed through the night, dozing beneath a cloak of furs, dreaming of a white wolf running beside her, a brother's voice in the dusk. In the morning, she built a fire and sang an old song, one her mother had sung, one her brother had hummed by the hearth so many years before. Then she lay down beside the cairn, closed her eyes, and let the snow fall. They found her days later, peaceful, a smile on her lips. They buried her beside Jon and Ghost, under the same tall pine, and raised a new cairn of stone and wood. Over time, flowers grew there, wild and untamed, and the foxes came in spring to make their dens among the roots. So the North remembered, and still the world spun. Winters grew softer, summers warmer, but sometimes, in the wildest places, children woke from dreams of a white wolf and a quiet man walking beneath the stars. Sometimes a trapper found the river iced in midsummer, or a village dog went mad and had to be put down. blue glass shining in its eyes. Each time the people would light a fire, speak the old words, and trust that somewhere, the balance was kept. Many generations passed. The cairns grew moss, and the pine stretched higher each year, its boughs laden with snow in winter, heavy with cones in autumn. People still came, some for pilgrimage, some by accident. Some left offerings, an arrow fletched with crow feather, a toy carved of bone, a scrap of fur or wildflower. Children grew and heard the stories and forgot them, then remembered again when winter came. In Winterfell, long after the last living soul who knew Jon Snow had passed, a child dreamed of a man in black and a great white wolf. She dreamed of a cairn beneath a pine, of a shard buried in the earth, and of the warmth of fire kindled against the cold. In her dream, the man looked at her and smiled, and she woke certain that, somewhere, the world was watched and guarded. At the world's edge, under the aurora, the memory lingered, a watch that never truly ended, a peace earned and protected. In the wind that swept down from the frost fangs, in the silence of falling snow, the stories lived on. Jon Snow, the White Wolf, the Watcher on the Edge. His name drifted across centuries, softened by time, but never lost. In every winter, a candle burned in the north. In every spring, wildflowers grew by the cairn where fire and frost had come to rest. And so the realm endured, cradled in memory and guarded by legend, as seasons wheeled and the world grew old and new again.